increased by 11% last year on the back of buoyant equity market and the digital revolution which happened due to the COVID, and we are all aware of it. So, for many wealthy Indian citizens specifically, US citizenship is often an attractive option because of a lot of advantages in terms of the security, safety, and other hassles as such. So before, rather than taking much of your time, I would like to hear from Aaron, who will be explaining you about IIUSA and how we are actually taking these seminars in all four cities. We have already completed in Delhi, Mumbai, and now we are in Hyderabad, and moving forward, we are going to Bangalore. So all over to you, all over to you, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity. IIUSA has made a very specific effort to partner with the PhD Chamber, and we're very grateful for everything that you guys have done with us and for us, and we look forward to a very long partnership. The reason we have engaged in general in this roadshow can be explained in one word, and that is education. It's important, we feel, for our members in the United States to have an opportunity to reach out and speak to potential investors as well as stakeholders in general in country, in India, so that they understand better what the EB-5 visa is about, how it works, what risks there may be in engaging the EB-5 process, how the political climate in the United States impacts the EB-5 visa and the EB-5 process, and let's face it, what the United States has to gain from EB-5 investors. There's simply no way to do that effectively with webinars and emails and newsletters. In order to do so, we felt it important to actually come here and be with Mayank and our partners here in India and have an opportunity to engage the stakeholders face to face.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Moving forward, just to let everybody know that we are also the MOU partners for IIUSA in India. So it's an honor to be a part of such a big organization and working jointly for many of the projects to come in future as well. So moving forward, I would request everybody to ask questions, and it is open for all. I would request if you can just raise your hand before I can mark somebody in. Thank you. Questions, please. Yeah. Yeah, I would request somebody if you can give the mic, please. Yeah. Yeah. This gentleman, please.
Sir, last year investment ఎంత వచ్చేసింది EB-5 visas?
Okay. Jagriti, are you here around? Jagriti? Yeah. Yeah. So he's basically asking you how many investment were there in the EB-5 last year from India specifically, if we have any figures to that.
I don't know the answer. India always stakes out a significant number of EB-5 investments on an annual basis. It's actually up there towards the top of countries on an annual basis with regards to the number of EB-5 investors. But I apologize. Yeah. I don't have an exact number from India for last year.
Okay. Next question, please. Next question. Yeah, I think Sugandha. Yeah.
Can you describe on the number of visas, student visas, work visas issued?
Do you think that's part of the EB-5 for the student as well as the work visa?
No. No, student and work visas are separate from EB-5, so I wouldn't be able to speak directly to student or work visas per se, other than, in very general terms, but it's a very separate program. Those are very separate programs from the EB-5 visa program. Closer.
Yeah. Next question, please. Yeah, you can just take the mic, please. Yeah.
That's a good question. Typically 3. Typically. There may be more, there may be fewer. But typically, on average, for every one investor, there are 3 derivative visas or 3 additional visas that go along.
For 3.
The amount of capital depends on the nature of the project in which the investor invests. If the investor makes an investment in a project that is in a low employment area in the United States, or it's in a rural area of the United States, areas that are called targeted employment areas, areas in which the U.S. federal government is encouraging more investment, and then the amount of capital required is $800,000 USD. If an investor invests in a project that is outside one of these areas, the required investment is $1,050,000 USD.
Thank you. Next question, please. But I think, Aaron, this confusion has been there. So, in fact, I was under the impression myself that specifically for the EB-5, if a husband applies for EB-5, automatically the wife as well as the children get involved in it. So, if a person has 2 children, so I think 3 are allowed, or it's basically a husband, wife, and a son or daughter, whosoever is there.
No, the children would be required. Typically, the average number of individuals that are wrapped into if you want to call it that, wrapped into an EB-5 investment initiative would be 3. The husband or the wife, whoever the investor is, the spouse, and 1 child. However, it's not limited to that number. On occasion, there is simply the investor, and on other instances, there is the investor, the spouse, and 3 children or 4 children.
Okay. But, so say for example, if somebody needs an add-on after the restricted numbers that he has, maybe he wants his parents to be engaged in that too. So do we have a provision where we don't give the exact or the whole amount of EB-5 program, but give a certain sum of money to get them involved in it, in the same program that I've taken?
No. If for some reason the additional family members are unable to apply under the investor's EB-5 investment application, there would be a need for a new investment to include additional members of the family, which means another 800,000 or another 1,050,000.
I see. So it's going to be in a new nutshell altogether. You have to start the investment once again in that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And there are families that I understand there are families in India who have made more than one investment in order to bring more than one individual, more people from the family to the U.S.
Great. I think that answers quite well. Next question, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we are not able to see. Yeah.
Okay. Would my global income and assets be taxable in both my country and origin and in the United States?
So the question is basically, say for example, if I've taken the EB-5 program, I've become a citizen of US. So am I taxable for both India as well as US, or it's going to be only focused towards India or focused towards US?
Global assets. So you would be taxable on all US assets as well as all assets in India, and if you had assets elsewhere in the world.
Okay.
How much time must I spend in the US every year to keep my permanent residency?
Well, if you're awarded a green card, if you're awarded permanent residency in the U.S., citizenship in the U.S., you're not required to stay there for any amount of time. You can come and go as you please. You would be issued a U.S. passport.
Okay. Can money be gifted by a parent or other relative be used for an EBE investment?
So they are saying that can money be provided as a gift from the family members to apply for EB-5 program?
The answer is yes, but it's a qualified yes. The Department of Homeland Security, which is currently the organization in the United States that oversees the evaluation of EB-5 investment applications, um, evaluates very stringently what they call the source of funds. So gifts are certainly allowable in order to help facilitate the investment, but if that gift comes from a family member who owns a business, or a grandmother or grandfather, or from the mortgaging of a home or more than one home, the U.S. government is going to scrutinize those source of funds very carefully, and they spend a lot of time going into detail with regards to where the money came from, whether the money that was offered came from legal or illegal or questionable sources. That's not to say that most people provide illegal source of funds. It's simply to say that regardless of where the funds come from, they will be heavily scrutinized. And when there is a gift made in an effort to facilitate the investment, it will automatically trigger, it'll automatically trigger scrutiny, because you have somebody who is not coming to the U.S. providing dollars to someone who is. It's just how they do it.
Thank you.
Right. Next question, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
చెప్పండి అడగండి ఏమన్నమా for all the dependents or the family, suppose an investor invests and he gets 3 visas, other 2 can work there. Will they get work permit to work there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Next question, please. Are there any more questions, Sugandha, or should we go for one-to-one? Yeah.
If I were to invest in a citizenship and my children were to study abroad, would they be considered as a US citizen and pay the same fee, or would that pay it like any other citizen who is not an American citizen?
So the question is, if you were making an EB-5 visa investment, how would your children be treated?
Right.
I think here the catch is that already the children are there in US studying, whereas you are in India, you have applied for EB-5. But will they still be considered, since they are your children, for the EB-5 program as well for residency?
They certainly can be, and a lot of EB-5 investors take advantage of that. There's also, under the current law, under the new law, there's also a provision that allows for what's called concurrent filing. So if a student from India is studying in the US under a student visa, and his or her mother or father decides to make an EB-5 investment, the student is allowed to file for citizenship concurrent with his investor parent's application, making it much easier for the student to secure citizenship long before, presumably, they would be able to do so under a student visa, which obviously would expire at some point. So the concurrent filing that's allowed for students is new in the statute, and very welcomed by everybody at IIUSA, because it benefits all of the stakeholders, and it makes it much easier to have conversations with potential EB-5 investors who have children studying in the United States.
Thank you so much.
Any more questions?
He is asking that what was the response for these kind of workshops or seminars we have organized at Delhi and Mumbai.
What was the response that we had at the other events?
Yeah, other events at Delhi and Mumbai.
Very favorable. A lot of people, a lot of interest, a lot of questions, hopefully a lot of meaningful and helpful answers. I was very grateful to Mayank and PhD for helping to set things up, but I think there was a tremendous amount of press inquiry, which is also very beneficial. So I would say by and large they were very successful events, and I hope that those attended learned a lot about the program and potential projects.
చాలా ఎంకరేజింగ్ గా ఉందని చెప్తున్నారు అమ్మ. He is asking what was the investment from India for this EB-5 and then last year, and what is your prediction of increase of that such investment this year?
Again, I don't have specific numbers for the investments from last year. I predict, however, that the number of investments will go up. It seems counterintuitive because the investment levels have gone up. The minimum investment level now is 800,000 USD. However, the types of investments that are available have expanded. There's a significant emphasis on rural programs, rural projects. But more importantly, unlike any other time in the EB-5 history, there is stability for the program and stability in the marketplace. In other words, the regional centers in the United States, all the stakeholders in the United States, as well as all potential investors abroad, can rely on the program being alive and well for at least 5 years. That's never been the case before. It's always been 1 year and then let's see. 1 year and then let's see. Now we have 5 years. It's an incredible opportunity to establish stability and to build a foundation. And so for those reasons, I predict there will be a lot more interest in EB-5.
Great. Any more questions, please? Yeah.
Once again, I have a question. So if someone's in USA already with the H-1B and already working there and filing taxes, are they eligible for EB-5? And how fast would the process take for them to get a citizenship?
I don't know the answer. I'd be foolish to try to answer it because I could make something up and give you incorrect information. My suggestion would be to raise that question again later this afternoon with one of the panels. There will be EB-5 immigration attorneys there who will be much better equipped to answer that question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah. Sugandha, are we good to? Yeah, then we can open the hours for one-to-one interaction with Aaron and Mackenzie. Okay, thank you so much all for coming, and I would request you to kindly join us for the high tea as well. Thank you.
లాంచ్ ఏం లేదండి, అది వాళ్ళు సౌండ్ వాడు కనిపించకుండా దాచిపెట్టాం అంతే. అదేం లాంచ్ లేదక్క వీళ్ళకే. అందరికీ నమస్కారం. IIUSA ఇన్వెస్ట్ ఇన్ USA అనే ఒక సంస్థ మరియు PhD ఛాంబర్స్ అనే ఒక స్వచ్ఛంద సంస్థతో కలిసి ఈ రోజున ఇక్కడ ఈ పత్రికా సమావేశం నిర్వహిస్తున్నారు. దీని ప్రధాన ఉద్దేశం ఏంటంటే అమెరికాలో రూరల్ ప్రాంతాల్లో అలాగే గ్రామీణ ప్రాంతాల్లో పట్టణ ప్రాంతాల్లో కూడా ఇన్వెస్ట్మెంట్స్ కనుక తీసుకొస్తే ఇక్కడ ఉన్న వాళ్ళకి అక్కడ కూడా సిటిజన్షిప్ ఇచ్చి అక్కడ అనేక రాయితీలు కల్పిస్తారని చెప్తున్నారు. ఎలా అంటే మనకి $8 లక్షల కనుక $8 లక్షల కనుక ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయగలిగితే వాళ్ళకి అక్కడ రూరల్ ప్రాంతాల్లో ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేసే ఆపర్చునిటీస్ ఉంటాయి. ఒక రంగం అని కాకుండా అనేక రంగాల్లో దే కెన్ చూస్ డిఫరెంట్ ఫీల్డ్స్ ఇన్ విచ్ దే ఆర్ లాట్ ఆఫ్ థింగ్స్ విచ్ దే కెన్ ఇన్వెస్ట్ ఇట్. ఇట్స్ ఓన్లీ ఒక అవేర్నెస్ ప్రోగ్రామ్ కోసం ఈ ప్రెస్ మీట్ కానీ వాటి కార్యక్రమం కానీ అవుతోంది. ఇది ఒక అవగాహన సదస్సు మాత్రమే. ఇంట్రెస్ట్ ఉన్న వాళ్ళు వీళ్ళ నెంబర్స్ని కాంటాక్ట్ చేస్తే వీ కెన్ గివ్ మోర్ ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్. యూ హ్యావ్ ఎనీ వెబ్సైట్? IIUSA.org అనే వెబ్సైట్కి వెళ్తే మీలో తెలియని వాళ్ళు, మీ పిల్లలు అక్కడున్న పేరెంట్స్ కానీ, ఇన్వెస్ట్మెంట్ ఆపర్చునిటీ కానీ, రియల్ ఎస్టేట్ రంగంలో కానీ, ప్రాజెక్ట్స్ సస్టైనబుల్ ప్రాజెక్ట్స్లో కానీ యునైటెడ్ స్టేట్స్ ఆఫ్ అమెరికాలో ఉన్న మీరందరూ వెళ్ళాలనుకుంటే ఈ IIUSA.orgకి మీరు కనుక బ్రౌజ్ చేస్తే, మీరు కనుక ఇంటరాక్ట్ చేస్తే ఆబ్వియస్లీ మీకు రెస్పాన్స్ వస్తుంది. వీ కెన్ మీట్. థ్యాంక్ యూ వెరీ మచ్. Rural is 8 lakhs, no? How much? $8 lakhs. $800,000. That's what. Minimum $8 lakhs అండి. మన 800,000 అంటారు వాళ్ళు, మనం 8 lakhs అంటాం అంతే. $8 lakhs మనం ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేస్తే అక్కడి నుంచి మొదలవుతాయి, ఎంతమందికైనా వేయచ్చు. ఇలా ఇన్వెస్ట్ చేయడం వల్ల ఒక కుటుంబం నుంచి 3 వీసాలు వచ్చే అవకాశం ఉంది. Urban, how much? For rural you said 800,000. For urban projects, how much you need to city or something like that?
800,000 for a targeted employment area or a rural area. The targeted employment area could be urban, rural, it could be suburban. It really is measured by the level of unemployment. It's a high level of unemployment, targeted employment area, 800,000. If it's low unemployment,
ఇది అర్బన్ రూరల్ కంటే కూడా ఎక్కడైతే నిరుద్యోగ సమస్య ఉందో, అన్ఎంప్లాయ్మెంట్ ఉందో, ఎక్కడ అది ఎక్కువగా ఉంటే అక్కడ తక్కువ ఇన్వెస్ట్మెంట్, అంటే $800,000 $8 లక్షల చేయాలి. అది అన్ఎంప్లాయ్మెంట్ తక్కువగా ఉండి ఎంప్లాయ్మెంట్ బాగా ఉన్న చోట అది కొంచెం ఎక్కువ అవుతూ ఉంటుంది. అంతేనండి, ఎనీథింగ్ ఎల్స్? ఆ మినిమం చెప్పారమ్మా.
applaud the efforts made by the IIUSA and PhD team to basically set up this event in Bangalore and Hyderabad as well. And special thanks to Team Avni and Mahati as well. Thank you. The relationship with IIUSA have gone stronger with each passing day, and we are happy to be their MOU partners in India. I'm sure many of you who are present here today are aware of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. For those who don't, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry has been working as a catalyst for the promotion of the Indian industry, trade, entrepreneurship for the past 116 years. It's a forward-looking, proactive and dynamic pan-India apex organization. As a partner in progress with the industry and government, PhD CCI works at the grassroots level with strong national and international linkages for propelling progress, harmony, and integrated development of the Indian economy. PhD CCI acting as the voice of industry and trade with a large membership of 150,000 direct and indirect members consisting of large, medium and small industries has forged ahead leveraging its legacy with the industry knowledge across multiple sectors to take the Indian economy to the next level. At the global level, we have been working with the embassies and high commissions in India overseas to bring in the international best practices and opportunities. Moving forward, please allow me to welcome our guest for the day, Mr. Anand Garau, IIUSA, Mr. Mackenzie Penton, IIUSA, Daniel Rand, Atlantic American Partners, Mr. Kai Ball, Cmb Regional Centers, Mr. Carl van der Merwe, EB-5 Marketplace, Mr. Brandon Mayer Law Group, Mr. Nikolai Henrichsen, Miller May Group, Mr. Mark Davies, Davies and Associate, Mr. Ashish Chipa, First Pathway Partners, Mr. Rishabh Gandhi, EB-5 Affiliated Network, Mr. Patrick Libresi, Cmb Enterprise, Mr. Prashant Ajmera, Ajmera Law Group, Mr. Janak Mehta, FRR Immigration, Mr. Utsav Doshi, RK Joshi, LLP. Now please allow me to call upon stage Mackenzie Penton from IIUSA to take the proceedings further. Mackenzie, all over to you.
Okay. Music again. Thank you, Mayank, and thank you to the PhD Chamber of Commerce for all of their support for not only this event, but the previous two events we hosted in New Delhi and Mumbai, and the one we're going to be hosting on Friday in Bangalore. My name is, as Mayank noted, Mackenzie Penton. I'm the Director of Events and Business Development with Invest in the USA, or IIUSA for short. We are the nonprofit membership association for professionals who are engaged in the EB-5 regional center industry. So we represent around 350 member organizations, both in the United States and around the world. Tonight you're going to hear from 10 of our member organizations who are going to be sharing their expertise on two panels, the first of which will focus on the high-level outlook or in the high-level perspectives of what EB-5 is and how it works and why it might be right for you. The second panel is going to focus on what, as an Indian investor, do you need to specifically consider as you look about pursuing an EB-5 visa. You'll also hear from each of our sponsors who will have a short sponsor presentation to introduce you to their projects or their services. After our presentations and after the panels, we'll have a cocktail reception and dinner as well for all guests. So hopefully everyone stays the whole time and stays engaged. I know people are still coming into the room, so we'll have a full room in short order. Before we get started, again, just a thank you to the PhD Chamber. Our partnership really started during COVID when we were precluded from being in person and hosting events like this. I think we hosted 3 or 4 webinar events together, very well attended, great events. Of course, it's much nicer to be in person and directly meeting with everyone face to face. But over the last 2 years, this partnership has really grown, and we're excited for these 4 events that we're hosting together now, of course, but really the long-term outlook for our collaborations. This is not by any means the first events that IIUSA has hosted in India. We've been hosting events here since around 2015, but we look forward to a much more regular participation in Hyderabad and elsewhere in the country in the coming years. So thank you, PhD, for all that help. As I noted, we're a membership association. Everything we do is supported by our members. Everything we do is on behalf of our members. So we have 14 total member organizations who sponsored our event series. So you'll see their logos here, of course, but there's information on all of these sponsors on your tables, in the tables near the back, on signage. So I encourage you to meet with all of our sponsors during the cocktail reception and learn a little bit more about what they do, but special thank you to our sponsors for all their support of IIUSA. With that being said, I'm going to show a short video here about EB-5, essentially what it is, how it works, and who IIUSA is, which I think will set the stage nicely for our first panel discussion. So enjoy. Nope.
What are the benefits? Let's break it down. EB-5 is an immigrant investor visa program that allows capital to flow from private investors across the globe into the U.S. economy. In exchange, these qualified individuals can apply for permanent residence in the USA. Where does the money go? It goes directly into the economy. Hotels, real estate, schools, hospitals, infrastructure, grocery stores, and a lot more. The investments must be made into a new commercial enterprise and be at risk by law. The total funding is at least $1,050,000, or $800,000 if the investment is in a targeted employment area, or TEA for short. These TEAs are either rural or suffer from high unemployment and are in special need of economic assistance. Funding a project can be made in two ways: direct investment or through an EB-5 Regional Center. The latter is usually more attractive because the 10-job requirement can be fulfilled through direct, indirect, or induced jobs, or a combination of the three. There's a bigger window for capital and no limitations on the number of EB-5 applicants who can invest in one project, so long as the business plan has been approved by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS in short. Let's talk numbers. According to IIUSA's latest Economic Impact Report, between federal fiscal year 2014 and 2015, EB-5 contributed nearly $11 billion in capital investment, over 355,000 jobs created or supported, over $55 billion in economic growth, over $23 billion in labor income for the U.S. workers. To sum it all up, EB-5 promotes foreign investment to improve U.S. neighborhoods and create American jobs. In return, it provides an opportunity for permanent residency, all at no cost to the U.S. taxpayer. Seems fair, right? Sounds like both sides really benefit from such a program. Now that we know what it is, let's talk about what it isn't. EB-5 is not a purchase of American citizenship, and in no way guarantees a green card, residency, or citizenship. It is not a way to bypass the U.S. government's security and defense. In fact, the EB-5 vetting process is one of the most elaborate of all visa categories. Just so we are all on the same page, it is highly beneficial to all parties involved and also safely managed. There is a lot of information and processes regarding EB-5. You don't need to browse the internet or seek out answers from the government. IIUSA is the hub for all things EB-5. IIUSA, or Invest in the USA, is a non-profit membership-based trade association and EB-5 advocate dedicated to the EB-5 Regional Center program and its many benefits. The mission is to improve the program, educate those who do not know of EB-5, and stimulate economic development throughout the country. IIUSA is the unifying voice for EB-5 Regional Centers. It is a source for vital information, including statistics, history, maps, and success stories. They also have a magazine, the Regional Center Business Journal, which gives readers in-depth updates, analyses, and perspectives on the industry's most pertinent and pressing topics. The nonprofit works closely with Congress to ensure the program's continuance and hopeful permanence. IIUSA members include EB-5 Regional Centers, law firms, financial services, foreign intermediaries, and more. You can apply for membership online and become a part of the community. IIUSA also hosts events around the globe that promote networking, education, and business development opportunities for EB-5 stakeholders. For over 30 years, the EB-5 program has helped build America. Since 2005, IIUSA has been pivotal in the program's success. We've only just scratched the surface. To learn more, apply for membership, or see real-life success stories, go to iiusa.org. EB-5.
Okay, well, thank you for listening to that. Before we jump to our panel, the question, of course, becomes, why are we in India? We love it here. We love traveling here and love the people and the food, but there's a reason for the business as well. India is the second largest EB-5 market in the world, behind China. Obviously, the last couple of years have been challenging for a lot of different reasons, for a lot of different people. So the 2020 and the 2021 statistics don't really paint the full picture of EB-5 activity in India. As you can see on these stats, though, between 2008 and 2022, there were 5,433 EB-5 investors from India. That's significant, of course. That equates to 2.1 billion in EB-5 economic development investment that was directly invested by Indian investors, or 2,842 green cards for Indian investors. So, like I said, 2021 probably doesn't have the most investors we've ever seen from India because we were locked down and at home, but there's a lot of potential in the Indian market, and we're very excited to be back here with our members. We're excited to grow this market substantially in the years to come. So with that, we're going to start with our panels. But first, a quick disclaimer on everything you're going to hear today, from the panels to the sponsor presentations. None of this information is intended, this information is intended only for educational purposes. Does not constitute legal advice in any way. Please always consult your legal counsel with questions, concerns that you have on the topics that you hear today. With that being said, all the information that you do hear is deemed to be accurate and up to date as of our event date. So with that, I'm going to invite our first four panelists up onto stage here. Our panel one is going to be the new world of EB-5. What changed with the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act of 2022? So I'm going to invite Kai Boyle from Cmb Regional Centers, Brandon Meyer from Meyer Law Group, Daniel Ryan from Atlantic American Partners, and Carl Vandermeer from EB-5 Marketplace to share their expertise. This panel is going to be about 45 minutes long. There will be Q&A at the end of both of our panels. Everyone should have a notepad on your table. If you have questions, write them down. One of our staff members will pick them up, and we'll bring them up to the panelists as you have them. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Brandon Meyer, who's going to moderate our discussion.
Testing.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mackenzie, for the warm introduction. Great to see everyone. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Hopefully we can provide some insight and general knowledge to you about the EB-5 process. My name is Brandon Meyer. I'm the founder and principal of Meyer Law Group, an immigration law firm headquartered in San Francisco, with additional offices in New York and San Diego, California. We have an all-star cast here tonight, as always. So I will give each of them the opportunity, 15, 20 seconds to introduce yourselves.
Well, thank you, Brandon. My name is Daniel Ryan, Managing Director, Atlantic American Partners. We're based in Tampa, Florida. We're a regional center. We're part of a 50-year-old investment banking firm that got into EB-5 about 13 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. My name is Kai Boyle. I am Vice President of Asia Markets for Cmb Regional Centers. CMB is one of the oldest, most active, and by many accounts, one of the most successful regional centers in the EB-5 space. We were authorized as a regional center dating back to 1997, and my role with the company is Vice President of the Asia Markets for CMB. Good to be here with you tonight, and thanks for being a part of our evening. I hope we can bring some insights to what's happening in EB-5 and answer questions that you may have about the EB-5 program. Thank you.
We'll certainly do our best. Carl?
Thank you, everyone. My name's Carl van der Merwe. I'm the Sales Director at EB-5 Marketplace. We're an online platform that provides due diligence on EB-5 investments, and we focus on projects that will likely result in a faster process.
Excellent. So I will get started here, moderator's prerogative. Let me just give everyone a brief overview of the recent changes in the EB-5 law. So effective March 15th of this year, after much drama and much controversy, we finally have a new EB-5 law that does many things, most of which, as we'll discuss, are to the direct benefit of investors and potential investors such as yourselves. So the highlights of this include an extension of the so-called regional center portion of EB-5 through September 30th, 2027. This is important because of the 4 types of EB-5, which I'll mention briefly. Usually 99% plus of people who go the EB-5 route go the regional center route for various reasons. So there's 4 types of EB-5: regional center, so-called direct, troubled business, and expansion of existing business. The latter 2, most people don't do. They're too difficult. So pretty much 100% of people combined participate in either regional center or direct. So regional center extended through September 30th, 2027. Direct program, some rules change, but that's a permanent program without expiration. So getting to the highlights of the new law: minimum investment in targeted employment areas, high unemployment areas, rural areas, or infrastructure projects, $800,000, or $1,050,000 in projects that do not qualify for one of those 4 designations. I think the big game changer of the part of the new law is the ability of people who are in the U.S. So, for example, if you have children that are in the U.S. as students or on H-1Bs, the new law allows for people in the U.S. to effectively combine the first 2 steps of the overall 3-step EB-5 process at the same time. This has major benefits to the investor and whoever's in the U.S. because not only does it allow them to basically start building their life in the U.S. significantly earlier than the previous process, it's designed to shrink the overall processing times as well. So I see this, it's known as concurrent filing. I see concurrent filing as a major game changer. Other important aspects is there was concern before under the old EB-5 law as to what happened to investors still in the system when the law is up for reauthorization. That problem has been effectively addressed, and so any investor who's in the system 1 year prior to the current expiration of the program can continue in the hopefully unlikely event that the regional center law is not extended beyond September 30th, 2027. And gentlemen, did I miss anything on the highlights of the investor stuff before I get to Carl to talk about some of the visa set-asides?
No, I think you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So Carl, I took the very brief highlights of the change in the law. Now there were some more technical changes to how visas were allocated and also some technical changes to the so-called direct program. So could you run through those for the audience?
Yeah, certainly, Brandon. So as far as the direct program is concerned, as Brandon mentioned, this is a permanent immigration program, so it didn't lapse as the regional center program briefly lapsed for 9 months or so. But it has changed in terms of the format. So there was a period from in the last 9 months or so, that you were able to do something called a pooled direct, and effectively invest in a project as a direct investor with other investors. That's no longer available, but you can still do a direct investment as a single investor. So I think that being probably one of the most important distinctions between direct and regional center. Direct, it has to be a single investor. It's designed partly for entrepreneurs wanting to establish their own business and hire 10 people, but you don't have to invest in your own business. You can invest as a passive investor into an existing business as a direct investor. The two main features of a direct investment relative to a regional center investment is that as a direct investor, you have to it has to be an equity investment into the business, and the way jobs are counted is also different from the regional center model. The regional center has a more lenient way of counting jobs, and it includes direct jobs, but also indirect jobs, induced jobs as well. So it's based on a formula, and it generates a fairly high job count. For direct, it has to be full-time payroll employees in the company, so a little more stringent on that front. As far as the so that program is available, the direct program. As far as the changes to the act that came into effect in March regarding visas or visa availability is concerned, there was quite a significant development as well, which also has some positive implications. And that, as was mentioned, I think briefly, about a third of the visas are set aside for investors in high unemployment targeted areas, in terms of high unemployment areas, infrastructure projects, and for rural areas. And why that's important is because it's essentially a sort of a new line that's been formed, and there is a potential of each country has a certain amount of visas that they're allocated, and if the demand exceeds that, then it potentially results in backlogs or retrogression, as it's referred to in the industry. And the important thing of the new visas that are set aside is it's a new queue that's being formed, so you're not going to be impacted by any potential retrogression if you invest in any of those categories. And in addition, one of the features that we do like to point out to investors is if you invest in a rural project, you're going to receive priority processing. Unclear what that means exactly, but our understanding is that it's going to be faster than normal processing. So it will result in a faster process, and to be determined exactly how much faster, but that's certainly one of the attractions of the new act as well. Is it's very beneficial to rural projects.
Now, Carl, one of the issues that we face in the industry is, we're from the U.S. Let's be clear about this. And so, when we come to places, Vietnam, China, India, and we throw around the word rural, hey, invest in rural projects. The word rural has a completely different, meaning, meaning, image than it does to us necessarily in the U.S. Here in the U.S., if we make a little money, if we can't afford a beach property, we buy something in the mountains, in the countryside, in the rural. Whereas in our market, rural is a place you either never go or left and never go back to. So reassure the audience that when we're talking about rural in a U.S. context, that it doesn't mean extreme dire poverty.
Yeah, no, thank you, Brandon, for asking that question, because that's a common perception that rural means risky. Why would I want to invest in a risky project? But there are often companies that are in rural areas for commercial reasons, because that's where their market is, or that's because they have lower rent or lower labor cost. There are a lot of good commercial reasons for operating in rural areas. For example, it could be a recycling plant, or a biofuel company, or even a ski resort, or a high-end hotel, boutique hotel. They're all good rural investment opportunities, and not necessarily more or less risky simply because of their location. So I think yes, that it's obviously going to depend on the investment and the merits of the investment, but I think one should definitely not assume that rural is risky.
And so I failed to mention at the beginning that we will be taking questions, but we'll be doing written Q&A. So Mackenzie in the back, if you or your designee wish to walk around and collect questions as they come, just raise your hand, hold up a piece of paper, and those questions will be collected and brought to us. And so Kai, if in my opinion and Carl's opinion, the changes to the law were very, very favorable to investors with some of the changes, concurrent filing, program stability, visa set-asides, etc. Tell us how, for regional center operators such as yourself, what impact does the new law have on how you do business?
Well, Brandon, the law, the new EB-5 law, the Reform Act of 2022, brought forth and codified some additional stringent requirements for the regional centers. And those new requirements are those stopgap measures that actually will put in place protections for investors. And let me explain that. The regional centers now, the operators of a regional center and the key personnel have to do background checks, such as myself and our ownership and those key personnel. We'll have to undergo a background check, and we have to make some declarations to the USCIS that we are not bad actors, we haven't broken the law, we're not a convicted felon. We'll also have to provide a written document or a series of documents to show how we are going to comply with the new EB-5 requirements. What are those steps that we as a CMB regional center, and now all regional centers, what steps are being taken to ensure compliance with the requirements of the new EB-5 program? There's also requirements to demonstrate how we're complying with the securities laws in the United States. All of those steps are meant to be in place to ensure that the investors are protected. Another example would be, Brandon, the fact that every regional center now has a requirement to either have a deposit control agent for the EB-5 funds or an annual audit of the regional center and the financial transactions for the regional center projects. So those are the steps that are now have been codified. They are in place to ensure that as much as possible that the regional centers are behaving in a way that's consistent with the requirement to protect investors and consistent with ensuring that the investor protections are in place.
Thank you, Kai. I just want to take a step back and define for the audience what a regional center is. You know, one of the frustrations that audiences such as yourself have is when guys like us get up here and we just start throwing around these technical terms without defining them. So definitely sensitive to that issue as well. So effectively what a regional center is, it's a group, a company that gets that applies for what's effectively a non-exclusive license to develop EB-5 projects within a defined geographic area. So that's what a regional center is. You know, the two gentlemen to my left, I forget how many regional centers you have amongst yourselves. You can certainly clarify it, but that's what a regional center is. It's a group that goes to the government and says, hey, we want to do this type of project, a hotel, and we want to do it in San Diego, California, and we want permission from you, the U.S. government, to allow people to invest in our project through EB-5 and get green cards out of it. So that's what a regional center is. And so Dan, so now that we know what a regional center is, and tell us about some of the other more technical changes to the law in terms of, you know, job counting and target employment area and the real technical nuances of how the law has changed and what that means for regional centers such as yourself going forward.
Well, thank you. Before I answer that question, may I ask the audience how many out there are actually prospective interested investors in the EB-5 program? Can you raise your hands? so there's just a few. Okay, so I presume some of you are agents and interested other parties. So first of all, let me start by saying this reauthorization is good for the industry. It's good for you as a prospective investor. It's strengthened the program. The program for 30 years needed some adjustments, and there were some problems. So one of the areas that is helping is in the new calculation for job creation. And again, we're going through all the fine detail on the legalese, but the job creation will be refined, and those that do know how to create jobs properly are going to do well. Some of the, quote, bad actors that were forcing projects and barely meeting the 10 jobs per investor criteria, they will probably weed out. The other area that's probably, again, we're throwing out a lot of terms, and to those few investors that are out there, feel free to come talk to us because it is a little confusing. But the definition of TEA is an acronym for Targeted Employment Area. And essentially that's an area that's at 150% above the area unemployment rate. Now the goal is to try to invest money, create jobs in areas where there's a higher unemployment rate. In the past, there was a little bit of shenanigans, as we call it in the States. It's a little bit of maneuvering of parcel touching 100 meters to this parcel that touched 200 meters, and a little meandering throughout different areas of the country.
Yeah, so Dan, there was a group out there that was telling me years ago how they, as a joke, but to prove the concept, obtained TEA designation for the United Nations building, the Westchester, New York Country Club, Radio City Music Hall, until the state of New York realized that that's what they were.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why this new legislation is welcomed. I mean, it's welcomed, let me put it this way, it's welcomed by the good players, and all the gentlemen up here are respectable players. You're going to see, as you do research, in the past there's hundreds of regional centers. Some are just average, basic real estate developer that just said, hey, I'm going to become a regional center. Sounds great. Well, they don't really know what they're doing. They had problems, and they're out of, either they're out of business or they soon will be out of business. So there is a whole new process to get reauthorized. We won't get into too much of that detail, but for you as investors and for you as Indian people interested in this EB-5 program, it couldn't be a better time to get involved in EB-5.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to, since I'm trying to make this as educational for the audience as possible, I just want to take a step back as well and just run through how the EB-5 process works for the individual investor. EB-5 is a three-step process for the investor: one spouse and any and all children under the age of 21. I'm not going to talk about the form numbers and this and that. It's really irrelevant. Just talk about the high-level concepts of what each stage, 3 stages, is about. So the first stage, we only really care about 3 items to get you and your family through that first stage of the process. The first one is, did you invest in a project that qualifies as a compliant EB-5 project? Yes or no? Second one is, can you prove the source of your $800,000 to make the investment comes from legal sources? It's known as source of funds. Yes or no? Source of funds is about 2 things primarily at its basic level: the credibility of the story of how you earned that $800,000 and the ability to document it. That's it. I mean, that's it. I mean, we can talk about these technical nuances, but does it make sense, and can you back it up with paper? If the answer is yes, your source of funds is good. Third element that we need to prove at the first stage of the EB-5 process is basically show what's known as path of funds. You know, to document how the money came from you as a principal investor to the project, and that's basically done in most instances by providing paperwork. So if you invest in a compliant EB-5 project, your source of funds, which I should mention that we're only worried about the $800,000 used to make the investment. So if you have, we don't have to prove the legality of your entire net worth, which is quite helpful in this. So good source of funds, good project, good path of funds. You should be approved in the first stage of the EB-5 process. No problem. Approval rates are historically, well, at least over the last 8 to 10 years, in excess of 90%. Second stage of the process is where you actually apply for the temporary 2-year green card. Probably the easiest step in the process. So as long as you're not a criminal, not a member of terrorist organizations, as long as you don't have significant prior immigration violations, and if you do, even let your attorney know ahead of time. Don't call him or her up the day of the interview and say, oh yeah, I forgot about those 5 arrests I had 10 years ago. Is this a problem? You know, do it at the beginning. So as long as you're not a criminal, terrorist, or have U.S. immigration violations, pretty much the second stage of the process is the easiest one. Third and final stage is more on the project, and that's where the project has to document that they took your investment funds and created the necessary 10 jobs. Project can show that, and if the project can show that they did not refund any portion of your investment funds early, 829, the third stage of the process should be approved as well, resulting in a permanent green card. Now, Carl, I know that I didn't prep you for this, but I'm going to ask you because I've been talking for too long. So everyone is concerned, justifiably so, about how long these 3 steps will take. And yes, the ability to do this in the U.S. and combine the first 2 steps should help shrink some of this time, but can you address, briefly talk about how the new law address the issue of processing times going forward?
Yeah, there's a recognition that processing times are long, and it needs to be addressed. So I think that's a good start. And in the Act, there was actually specific provision made to address this, and I believe it involves basically an initial sort of investigation into how to improve processing times. And ultimately, I think it will, that USCIS is going to probably increase their fees sufficiently to staff up and address processing times and bring those down to certain guidelines that they've set for processing. So that is definitely something that they're striving to do, and we're all hopeful that they do that, because frankly that's the biggest concern that I hear from most investors is processing times take too long. But there are fortunately ways you can sort of speed that up, and as I mentioned earlier, one of those would be to invest in a rural project. The law basically said that rural projects are going to receive priority processing. It isn't quite clear what that means, but we did a straw poll amongst some immigration attorneys, and that they felt that it could probably result in an approval within a year. That would be wonderful. And then there's another category called expedited processing, and that is if you invest in a project that's in the national interest. So that those are few and far between, but that we do know what that means, and that essentially means that you get moved to the front of the queue and could get approved quite quickly. So though there are some ways to speed things up if timing is a priority, but as Brandon mentioned, I think a lot of that can be addressed through concurrent filing. If you are in the US, you can essentially now get the lion's share of the green card benefits very early on without having to wait for the I-5 to 6 approval.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is very important, this ability to do concurrent filing, because one of the stressful issues that parents face is if their child is getting close to the age of 21, and because once you reach the 21 with some exceptions, the child is too old to complete the process. But if they can get the second stage filed in the US, then the age out issue becomes entirely irrelevant to them. And also too, we see this for those who are F1 students who've completed their their student time in the U.S. and can't get an H-1B visa because the H-1B numbers are too low, or demand outstrips supply for new H-1Bs by a factor of 5 to 1. EB-5 eliminates this stress for those who are students in the U.S. You start the process for your child early in their university days, then they should have their green card by the time they hit the job market. Gives them a massive advantage over their F1 student peers who are stressed about whether or not they'll be selected in the lottery, taking jobs with companies they don't work for purely because the company's willing to sponsor them for an H-1B. And then we just had the H-1B lottery at the end of March. This is the time of year where we're receiving lots of calls from people that say, hey, I didn't get selected in the lottery. I have to leave the U.S. by mid-July. What do I do? It's a very, and at that point, EB-5 is the only option for most people. So I think I kind of gave the answer away, Kyle, before I asked the question, which is, one of the criticisms that we hear from, or as a project operator, you hear and Dan hears as well, is why would I want to invest in this EB-5 thing? You're only offering me a half a point a year. I want to make real money off this EB-5 thing. So can you offer me a higher return? So can you tell the audience maybe why that's not necessarily the best way to look at EB-5?
And I'm chuckling because I'm seeing some people nod right now. So it is a question that comes up. Before I address that, for the folks that are prospective investors, there's a couple of things. It's easy for us to we talk about so many things. We want to make sure, it was on the video, but we want to make sure you understand this is a returnable investment. It's not a fee. Okay, that's important. A lot of times we start talking and the next thing you know, we forget to talk about the basics. The other thing is, when you start looking at so-called projects, because you're going to see projects all over the place here. Projects are projects, that's good. And you want to know about the projects, but really what's most important is the sponsors behind the projects, the folks that are actually going to build this project. And in many cases, some of the sponsors are these so-called bad actors that will be weeded out. So when we talk about projects, please stop and say, I want to know about the sponsor group. And that is very, very critical. And then the third thing is, at the end of the day, these projects, which are really driven by a good sponsor, you want to make sure that they create a lot of jobs. Because ultimately, this is a job creation program. And the minimum is 10 jobs per investor. Our company, on average, over 35 projects have created 20 jobs per investor. So these are critical, basic things that I think we need to just take a minute to address.
Yeah, so Kai, would it be fair to say that, for potential investors who are evaluating projects, that if someone offers something that's a return that's significantly higher than what kind of the median of the market is, that may be a cause for concern?
It may be a red flag, and we have to examine, once again, that risk-reward equation and that ratio. Typically, when there is a higher rate of risk, there is a required higher rate of reward, or a payment or a pledge of higher interest to attract those investors who would not wish to undertake any risk at all for their immigration pursuits. EB-5 is that way. Investors that want to do EB-5 want to know that when they invest with a regional center, when they are moving forward, that they can plan on achieving what their goals are, and that's to get a permanent green card. And then at some point in the future, there's the hope of the return of that investment capital. Very few people that I've ever spoken to, and in fact I have spoke to hundreds, if not thousands over the years, have ever said to me, no, I don't really care about that stuff, just give me a high rate of return. What the goals are for the EB-5 investors to get that permanent green card. Focus your mind, and for the investors, focus on the fact that the green card is the return. Any financial return that is a result or a return on the investment is modest, and that's by design. The projects that we put forth, that we underwrite, and that we offer in the marketplace for EB-5 investors pledge a very modest return on the investment capital or distribution of annual profits. It's modest, but the goal is to achieve the permanent green card. And to this date, we've been able to deliver that without fail. Every investor that files an I-829 in a CMB project does so knowing that sufficient jobs have been created for the approval of that petition.
Yeah, so I guess to summarize, the kind of outcome matrix from best to worst in terms of EB-5, absolute best outcome, return of the 800,000, full green card approval, and some return above that. The worst outcome, obviously, is return of less than 800,000 and no green card. But the second worst, in my opinion, would be 800,000 back, return of investment above the 800,000 and no green card. That's a complete waste of time. So that's the way of saying the main ROI is the U.S. permanent residence. I'm sure if there's people with quantitative experts out there who could calculate the value of the green card. Actually, Mackenzie, I think that should be Lee's next job, is to quantify the value of U.S. permanent residence for various people. So give that assignment to him as well. We have about 10 minutes left. How are we doing for questions back there, Mackenzie? Okay. So Kai, oh, sorry, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I want to concur. I completely agree with Brandon. The reason you're doing EB-5 is to come to America, live, educate your kids, green cards. You're not doing it for the best real estate investment in the world. And you're going to find a lot of players out there, they're going to try to attract you with, we'll pay you 3%, we'll pay you 2.5%, we'll pay you 4%. You're not doing it for a return on investment. You're doing it to get yourselves and your families to America, get your money back, get your green cards. Look at it as you're putting the money in a bank account with a safe haven. At the end of the day, you come to America, you live a good life, you get your money back. So don't spend a lot of time shopping around and seeing all these different, quote, projects that are paying big, big returns, because at the end of the day, the green card is, as Brandon said, your return on investment.
Well, Dan, what I used to tell people was if you want to make a lot of money, high return, invest in Apple stock. But I can't even say that anymore now that it's down 25%.
That's true. So the point is, be very careful.
And to the point that the goal is to achieve the green card for yourself and your family members, and then at some point to see that investment capital return. We've started an entirely new platform, non-immigration based, for that high rate of return, a pledge of that. But it's separate. It's completely separate from the immigration side on the EB-5. This portion, the NHK portion, it separates that, and it delineates the fact that there is a purpose for the EB-5 investment. That's to create jobs and for the American economy, and number two, to get a green card for the investors.
I'll stick with you, Kai. I think you briefly mentioned about how the regional centers, now that we've defined what they are, as part of the new law, they're supposed to recertify. Like, what is that about? Can you just run through that for a couple minutes for us?
Sure. The USCIS interpreted the new statute as requiring the regional centers to, number one, the existing regional centers that were in existence at the time of the statute being adopted, they were to no longer be a valid entity as for the purposes of an EB-5, in the EB-5 program. They interpreted that anyone that wanted to be a regional center had to be reestablished and to go through the process of filing a new form, a newly created form, and that would request that the USCIS provide the benefit to the applicant of establishing a regional center. And the regional center, when you hear the word region, it is meant to be a term that applies to a geographic scope, a specific geographic area. And the law says a limited geographic area. So the regional centers, or those who wish to become a regional center, had to fill out this new form, identify the geographic area in which they wish to operate, how much money they intended to invest or they could pool for investments, and the jobs that would be created and what the process for job creation. So it was this long, extensive form that was required. And that's based upon the interpretation by the USCIS. However, in the real world, there are those that have a different interpretation of the law and that differing opinion of how the law should be applied to existing regional centers. That interpretation included the fact that, hey, wait a minute, the Congress's intent was to move the program forward. It had lapsed for a period of time, and now this was not a rebirth or a reestablishment, but it was a revival of the existing program with some concepts that were no longer, or that were not there, that needed to be implanted into the program to protect investors and to revitalize the program, as it were. It wasn't meant to scrap everything and to start new. So there have been lawsuits that have been filed on, each coast is filed, and it's working its way to the middle. And I know that IIUSA has participated in that. Some regional centers have participated in filing lawsuits because they challenge the interpretation of the USCIS, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, that eliminated regional centers. And so we'd like to get back to business as soon as possible, but now we've got this process where we've got to follow the USCIS precept, but there's challenges to that in the courts.
So Carl, I'm a potential investor sitting in the audience again, and I'm listening to Kai and thinking, gosh, it's EB-5 industry again, just same old stuff in here for a couple years now. Can't get their act together. I can't quite file yet, so I'll just wait until all this drama gets resolved. Can you explain to me why me waiting may not to start the process may not be the best approach?
Yes, certainly. First of all, I'm quite hopeful that it will be resolved quite soon. I think the quickest way for USCIS to sort of disarm these two lawsuits that are challenging the fact that all regional centers now have to get redesignated is to actually approve regional centers. And so I think that is my expectation, that this won't last much longer, and we'll start seeing regional centers get redesignated very soon. But to your point, Brandon, I think if you're going to go down this route, it does take a little time to get your application ready, to start working on your source of funds, working with your immigration attorney. That does take a couple of weeks. And ideally, you'd want to be in a position to move quite quickly, because once regional centers are redesignated and the program reopens, you'd ideally want to be one of the first investors in, because in particular, I think, because as I mentioned earlier, about a third of the visas are going to be set aside for investors in high unemployment areas, in rural areas, and in infrastructure projects. And if you're investing in any of those projects, you really do want to grab one of those visas. And so if you're in a position to move quickly, you'll be one of the first investors to file. You guaranteed a visa. And so I think there's a big benefit to being able to move quickly, and that would mean starting the process now.
Well, yeah, absolutely, Carl. And I think, like the Rolling Stones once sang, time waits for no one. So I always see this thing where that's just like, oh, I like Dan's project, I like Kai's project, but I'm just going to wait. And then, other people didn't wait and jump in line and subscribe to you. Just subscribe to that particular project before you do. So what does that mean? That means you have to start your due diligence all over again. So you're always, as the saying goes, a day late and a dollar short by waiting. I like to say too that waiting never made anything go faster, and that is certainly true in the EB-5 context. So I think we have 5 minutes left. Any questions? Any written questions that were submitted out there? No? Okay. Oh, all right. We got a couple. Good. So while those are being collected, go for it, Dan.
Yeah,
it's all
sure.
you.
While we're waiting, and I think Brandon, everyone up here is on the same page. While you're doing due diligence and thinking about whether or not this is right for you, you can be active. You can start organizing your financial documentation. It's called source of funds. It does take a while. So, you're going to be looking at different sponsors, regional center, projects, waiting for all these things to kind of settle. You can do your own work right now on getting your financial statements in order, because you will have to document how you obtained the money, where it came from, and have a paper trail. So if you wait, just like these gentlemen say, it could take another 60 days. But if you start doing that now, it'll help in the process. The other thing I will mention, and this is a little plug for the attorneys out there, including Brandon, the best thing to do, and I know he's gonna, there's a little lunch involved in this probably sometime down the road, but it's really important to start talking to immigration attorneys. They're gonna answer a lot of these questions that regional centers, we're not lawyers, they are. A lot of the questions you're gonna have are legal related, that you really should start and interview these folks. Generally, we tell all of our clients, talk to at least 3. Review, talk to them, sit down with them, and find out what their track record is, and it gets you a process to get going.
Absolutely. When do you want to do that lunch?
It'll be in San Francisco at the most expensive restaurant.
So we'll turn it over for, oh, got some questions coming up. All right. Okay, so question is, it's a due diligence question. How foolproof are these investments? Is there a guarantee?
You know, the law, EB-5 law, requires that the investment be fully at risk. So there are no guarantees in EB-5. So, however, that doesn't mean that the investment needs to be risky, nor that it needs to be speculative. Good regional center projects, ours included, specifically delineate and take no risks or as little risks as possible when putting the projects together. I'll share with you the fact that we leave nothing to chance. And in fact, if there is any situation where there's a risk that we cannot either mitigate, manage, or eliminate in some way for CMBs and projects, that's one that never sees light of day. It never makes it to the marketplace. But the due diligence questions go to doing your homework. What are you being told? What's the background of the regional center operator? How successful have they been throughout the years? How many projects have they been able to accomplish the goals for the investor? How many times have they failed? How many times have they succeeded? How many investors have they been able to help through the entire process? What's their pedigree? There's all of these questions that need to be asked, and that's just the regional center operator. Then getting beneath the veneer on the projects, looking into the offering documents to see what it is that you're signing on the dotted line for. Those are all important things that need to be taken care of as the decision process moves forward before you invest.
So so I think sometimes when potential investors are confronted with the EB-5 specific term of at-risk investment, I think that sometimes is conflated with risky or even reckless. Well, you're saying that doesn't need to be the case and shouldn't be the case?
I would say that wholeheartedly. The term risk is defined as opportunity for gain and opportunity for loss. It's nothing more than that.
I'd like to add something to that. We look at over 300 projects a year, and we approve 3. So that should give you a feel for the type of due diligence that we do. There's a lot of bad projects, a lot of bad sponsors. So the money is at risk. That's why you want to make sure you deal with a really good sponsor. We've done 35 projects successfully. We've turned down thousands of projects that we're grateful we turned down.
So with that, so I have a question that relates to what types of industries do you generally see EB-5 projects and why? So they list here real estate, pharmaceuticals, or services. So you touch upon which types of, for those industries and other, which types do we tend to see a lot of EB-5 projects, and why is that?
Okay, I'll start. In our case, we focus on real estate solely because that's our history for 40 plus years. And part of the reason is we're just very good at it. And job creation is a strong component of that. Lately, we've been doing what's called purpose-built student housing all over America. There's an enormous shortage of student housing in America, especially at top-tier universities. So we focus on real estate. Due to the change in these new laws, we will probably look at some distribution centers in these rural areas that we're talking about. But at the core, we've been very successful with what we call in America multifamily, which is traditional rental apartments or flats, as you might call them, and purpose-built student housing, which is doing very well.
So basically, whatever it is, it has a real estate component.
Correct.
So Kai, why would most of these, on the regional center side, we'll talk about direct in a second, Carl, but on the regional center side, why is it that at its fundamental core, most of these projects have a real estate component to it?
Typically because for our projects and for the majority of projects, the job creation results from the capital expenditure during the construction or the improvement of that real estate by the regional center's involvement. Now, the undertaking of the project itself may be the regional center who's developer, which is not a good combination, or it could be a developer that knows what the devil they're doing and using EB-5 funds as part of the component. But the job creation results as a part of that capital being expended and flowing into the U.S. economy. And in fact, jobs are created as the money is spent. So that is why it's easy to track the job creation and the improvement of the real estate, improvement of the land. The land is one piece of it. That doesn't create any jobs. But once the construction or the improvement of that land goes from bare ground to an improved edifice, a building of some sort, whether that be hotel or industrial logistics or whatever, manufacturing facility, whatever that happened to be, that asset type, the job creation is a result of the capital being expended during the construction phase of the project.
So basically, regional center, capital intensive projects because it's just easier to prove the job creation?
It's easier to track, yes it is.
All right, and Carl, you get the last word on what types of projects you see in the direct market and why.
We look at a wider variety of companies for the direct opportunities. Just as a reminder, this is a single investor looking for a business. There can be a wide variety of businesses. We tend to look at manufacturing type companies. For example, we've also got all sorts of other types of business. At the moment, we've got dental practices. So those are quite popular as well. But even for the regional center deals, we do tend to look at non-real estate deals as well in rural areas. And they tend to be sort of manufacturing type companies. So we do have a number of manufacturing companies in rural areas as well. So I think the interesting thing is that it's going to be quite a diverse market for EB-5 opportunities. I think you'll find there will be the usual real estate investments. There'll be in various areas, rural and urban areas. You'll find other types of opportunities as well in operating companies as well. So I think that's all very good for investors that have more choice.
So basically on the direct side, more labor intensive type industries. Okay. All right. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. So Mackenzie's standing over my shoulder telling me to hurry up. So apologies if we did not get to your question. I mean, we'll all be here. So, come seek us out individually. So if your question was not addressed, we'll be happy to do so separately. Otherwise, thank you, everyone. And we look forward to speaking with you during the course of the event.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you to our panelists. We have a lot of questions that were not addressed. So as Brandon said, they're more than happy to answer your questions during the networking portion. But of course, we have another panel coming up here as well. So I'll share these questions with the moderator. We'll make sure that they're all addressed. But Carl, don't go too far. Actually, we're gonna begin the sponsor presentation portion of our event. So I want to invite Carl back up on stage He's going to explain a little bit more about EB-5 Marketplace, what they do, and who they are. And I think once the tables are situated, he can go ahead.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Yeah, my name's Karel van der Merwe. I'm the sales director of EB-5 Marketplace, and we're an online platform that focuses on investments that result in faster processing times. So there are really 3 tracks for processing in terms of processing times. Normal processing is very lengthy now, and it could take several years to get your approval through sort of normal processing. As I mentioned on the panel, there's fortunately other options. In the new act, there was special provision for rural investments. They receive priority processing, which we think is probably going to take about a year to get your approval. And then there's another track called Expedited Processing, and that's for investments that are in the national interest. And we do know that that takes a couple of months to get your approval. That's the official timeline for on USCIS's website for your I-5 to 6 approval. Currently almost 4 years. I am hopeful, optimistic that that will come down, and that was obviously partly due to COVID as well. So I do believe that that will improve. This is the visa bulletin on Department of State's website for June. It sets out the number of visas available globally and for each country, and there are 10,000. We're obviously most concerned about EB-5. There are 10,000 visas available annually. Each country has an allocation of 700 or 7% of those. The good news is that India is current, so there are visas available. But the concern is that there are several thousand visas in process, and that could very quickly eat up the 700 visas that are available annually and result in backlogs. So the way you get around that is to invest in any of the set-aside categories, rural, high unemployment, or infrastructure. And roughly 1/3 of the visas are set aside. So there's a lot of visas available there. In particular, rural gets 20% of the set-aside visas. So there's a lot of availability there, which we think will last for several years. So investing in rural makes a lot of sense. You're going to avoid any potential backlogs, and on top of that, you get priority processing. So we're obviously focusing very much on rural, and these are some direct rural opportunities that we have at the moment. So these are for single investors that want to invest in a business as a passive investor. For example, we've got a modular home builder called Dakota Builtwell. They manufacture modular homes, they install them in rural areas, and then they manage them for rental income. So they're looking for a single investor to help fund the business, and they're growing very rapidly. We've got a meat processing facility, and we've got 2 seafood distribution businesses. So again, these are small businesses, but they're in rural areas. You qualify for priority processing, and you'll have a visa available. This is a regional center investment that we'll have available when the regional center market restarts. It is a biofuel company. It's based in Pennsylvania, manufactures biodiesel. It uses biomass, converts it to biodiesel, and the byproduct of that is graphene, which it sells. It's a $250 million development. They've got offtake agreements in place. They've got supply agreements. They've got some state funding. They get subsidies. It's a great business, and again, it's also in rural, and so you get the visa set aside and you get priority processing. We're also fortunate to have an expedited deal this is a hospital in Ohio. It's called the East Ohio Regional Hospital. It's operational. It's been operational for over a year. They have about 500 employees, and the reason it qualifies for expedited processing is because they're establishing a wing at the hospital to treat patients with opioid addiction. And Ohio is the epicenter of the opioid crisis in the US. So we do know investors are getting expedited in this deal. We've already had over a dozen investors that have been approved for expedited processing. We have that deal available, and in fact these are some of the approvals notices that we got in the last month or two. This is a snapshot of our website. If you go to EB5marketplace.com, there's a lot of information on our various deals. You can click through the various tabs, and you can see the project video, the due diligence video, the strengths and risks on each project. We try and put as much information out here as possible, make it as transparent as possible and as easy to understand. Our background at EB-5 Marketplace has very much been as a due diligence provider on other third-party EB-5 projects, but we use that same discipline obviously on our projects as well. When we analyze them, we make sure that they're going to meet your immigration and investment outcomes successfully. So these are some of the things that you would go through in the normal process of due diligence, verifying all the claims that are made in the offering documents, making sure that they're credible, performing background checks on all the key personnel, doing a market feasibility study, making sure the business plan is credible, evaluating the controls and investor protections that are put in place, and making sure any conflicts of interest, if there are any, are addressed. We don't have time to discuss all of that, but happy to chat about it afterwards if you'd like. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Carl. And like I said before, a lot of our sponsors, or hopefully all of our sponsors, have additional information on their projects and their services in the back of the room, which you'll be able to grab during the networking breaks. We're going to continue on with our sponsor presentations. I'll invite Abi Lohia from Golden Gate Global. He's a regional center operator out of the San Francisco Bay Area. He's going to explain a little bit more about his projects.
Thank you. My name is Abhinav Lohia. By background, I'm licensed to practice law in India. I'm also licensed to practice law in New York. I've been involved with EB-5 for the last 10 years. I started off as a partner at an immigration law firm, Davies and Associates. They are here. I was with them for 4 years. Then I moved to the regional center side. I'm also a licensed finance professional in the United States. So the good part about having these licenses and everything is that this is a financial product. You can look up my record or the record of the firm I represent on the FINRA broker check, and I highly recommend doing that because EB-5 are securities, and you need to be sure that not only that your immigration goals are met, but also your investment is safe. So I'm representing Golden Gate Global. We are headquartered in San Francisco, and we have offices in Chicago and New York. We have over a decade of experience in the EB-5 industry. We won many awards. We were Regional Center of the Year in 2019. We have a very strong institutional quality team coming from BlackRock, PwC, and a bunch of other world-renowned institutions. We have over $1 billion under management. Out of that, $650 million is raised in EB-5 funds from over 1,300 investors. We've done 12 prior projects, and we've already repaid over 300 investors. So in terms of track record, we have a very clean track record. We've never lost $1 of our investors' funds, which is very important. You'll find a lot of promoters say that, hey, we've repaid so much capital, but if you ask them, have you lost any dollars, the likely answer is yes. Not only that, we have a very clean track record. We maintain a 100% success rate with USCIS, but also we've not been sanctioned by any federal authority or anything. So we have a very clean track record. We are more than just EB-5. We do wealth management, we raise capital, private equity capital, and Urbanite Capital is our debt fund where we fund projects, and we have 400 million under management in that. We also have Golden Residential Services. We promote properties built by Lennar, which is a world-renowned developer for investment by foreign nationals. This is our ownership team, executive team. Mr. Willie Brown, he's a champion of diversity and inclusion. He was the first African-American mayor of San Francisco. He served from 1996 to 2004, and he was Speaker of California Assembly, and he was re-elected 16 times. The Bay Bridge that connects Oakland to San Francisco has been named in his honor. Mr. Stephen Kay, he's a majority shareholder. He's been an attorney for over 50 years and has over 35 years of real estate transactions experience in the Bay Area. He was the in-house counsel for San Francisco 49ers, which is the NFL team for San Francisco, for 15 years. Mark Jorgensen, our third owner, he is a former US naval officer. He also has an MBA from Stanford, and he's worked at Lehman Brothers and Farallon Capital in the past. We have a pretty large team. We have 30 people dedicated to EB-5, very diverse. We have people of Indian origin, Turkish, Japanese, Chinese, American, obviously. So everyone understands what immigration means, and to that point, I know, a lot of industry representatives tell you, hey, don't wait, all of that. Well, I'm a first-generation American. I moved from India. It took me 2 years to make that decision. So I would say this immigration is a life-changing experience, and you should take your time. I have a completely different perspective on this. We've done some marquee projects. We co-funded the Sacramento Kings Arena, which is an NBA team for Sacramento. We also co-funded the largest, one of the largest real estate developments in the Bay Area, which is the Brooklyn Basin, and that's also our current project. We are very California and San Francisco Bay Area centric. We are in the heart of San Francisco in the financial district, surrounded by all these Fortune 500 companies, and we are building this project right across the bay, close to where Twitter just leased an entire building. The reason for this project is really simple. More than 10% of Fortune 500 companies are located in California. Top universities like Berkeley and Stanford are also there. So it's talent, there's opportunity, there are high salaries, and this project that we are building is a real estate project. We are building we are funding 2 residential buildings. So I think I'm out of time, but if anyone wants any details, I'll be at the back. You can take my card, we can schedule a call, or we can meet in person. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Abhi. Some really interesting sports investments from the Golden Gate Global team, but I told Abhi I think they'd be better off if they were doing cricket stadiums. But up next is we're going to have Mark Davies from Davies & Associates, a law firm who's going to, Mark's going to provide a little more information on what his firm is up to.
Aye, goodness, those lights are bright. Thank you for coming and good evening. I'm Mark Davies. I'm the owner and chairman of Davies & Associates. We have been in India for about the last 10 years doing EB-5. I was just looking, and it looks like our first Hyderabadi EB-5 investors about 7 years ago. They have their money back, they have their green card, and they've finished the process. So, it can be done. It's a process that's proven that it works. So, let's see these slides. That's just an overview of my firm. That's where we have presences around the world. That's what we get up to for what it's worth. Media coverage. We've been I pay my PR guy on my firm quite a lot of money, and I guess this is what he does for his money. He gets us in the Indian media and has relationships with reporters. So you can read about it all in the Economic Times. The measles, where we have Indians moving sort of all over the world. So again, it's been a privilege to work with a lot of people with the last name Reddy, and a lot of physicians from this area too, amongst others. What do we do? What does my firm do? We do a few things. We do immigration law, which is what we're talking about right now, which is EB-5, E2, investor law. In addition to that, we do business formation, so we help people set up businesses in America, and then we do some written and planning advice. So, you know, if you're an EB-5 investor, there are some things you want to think about in addition to EB-5, which, you know, aren't covered by some of the panels, one of which is tax. It's never, if you think you want to be a US green card holder, it's never too early to start thinking about tax. People get scared by American tax rates, and there's really no need to be. The guys always say, the guys who own businesses quite often end up paying lower tax in America for what it's worth, so we can help with those kinds of things. This is a slide, I don't know why our marketing department put it in here, because it's out of place, but it doesn't really matter. This is just looking at different types of US visas for your education. So investor visas, E2 is non-immigrant, EB-5 we're talking about this evening is the immigrant investor visa. Transfer visas, famous L1 visa, you can transfer from India to America. The green card sort of equivalent of that, if you will, is EB-1C, international managers and executives. Then you've got the infamous H-1B visa as a work visa, and then EB-2, EB-3 is sort of ways to do that. So there's a full panoply of options. What's next? Success. So, you know, we've been privileged to serve hundreds and hundreds of Indian investors over the last 7 or so years. We've never had a failed case that I can think of, and including lots of ladies and gentlemen from Hyderabad. So, oh, we'll do other things too. So actually, not very many people have heard about the Italian option. There's some pretty cool stuff going on there. Not that it's relevant to EB-5, but we do that. And then you can probably tell from the way I speak, I was born in the UK. I've been in America since I was 23 years old, and been an American lawyer since then. But, you know, sometimes people have an interest in the UK too. But it's all about EB-5. So these are some of our sort of EB-5, if you will, focus team. That's me. Sukanya's at the back of the room. She's based here in India. She has familiarity with, she's a licensed Indian lawyer. She has familiarity with Foreign Exchange Management Act and Liberalized Remittance Scheme. Blake is in charge of our EB-5 team. He's in San Francisco. I'm not sure why they put Deepak there, but Deepak's in charge of our Central California India business, and certainly is involved with EB-5 as well. So before I get pulled off the stage for talking too long, which usually happens, I'll say thank you very much and look forward to talking to you later. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and thank you for sticking to the time allotment. We have one more sponsor presentation before we get to our short coffee break. So I'm going to invite Asif Chipa from First Pathway Partners up for their presentation. They're a regional center based out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but I believe they have a project in the Coachella Valley in California that he's going to tell you a little bit more about. So Asif?
Thank you, Mackenzie. Good evening. My name is Asif Chipa, Managing Director for First Pathway Partners, India and Pakistan and Middle East. First Pathway Partners was founded in 2008 by Mr. Robert Kraft, and Mr. Kraft is also a president of IIUSA since last 6 years, elected by the peer regional centers. In past, we have successfully closed multiple projects. Not only that, but also repaid the multiple projects. Right now, as I just want to introduce to our new project, and for that, I'd like to have a look at this nice video.
I really enjoy our beautiful city, and what attracted me was the progressive vibe of people visiting and wanting to live, work, and play in La Quinta and the greater Coachella Valley.
It's always been known as the gem of the desert, but it's really quite true.
When First Pathway looks for a project, first we look for a great partner. And the Robert Greene Company has a fantastic track record of delivering great projects for themselves and those that bring projects to them.
In addition to having fantastic projects, we also are experts in making sure that people make it through the entire process very seamlessly. And no matter what happens, you know, we have that expertise to be able to give you the answers that you need right away. The Robert Greene Company is really a world-class developer.
They're excited about working with us. We're excited about working with the Robert Greene Company, and this is going to be a very, very successful project.
Silver Rock, as its own location, is really special. It's right at the base of the Santa Rosa Mountains. The landscape and the visual impact of those mountains is more than just something to look at. It's actually something you almost feel. It really is very magical.
It's anchored by the Coachella Valley, world famous, a great place for people to go as a vacation destination. On top of that, there's the golf resort.
It has a golf course designed by Arnold Palmer. It's spectacular. It's like the perfect place to get away. It's like you're in another world.
We are building the Montage La Quinta and the Pendry La Quinta. We will be the first ones to actually combine those two brands in the same location.
We like the fact that you have these two brands that actually afford you the ability to have generations of families together in the same place, experiencing the same things, but you get to walk away from that telling different stories.
This entire Coachella Valley is very events driven between art and golf and tennis and music festivals, that this is a needed amenity and location for all of those attractions and more.
I think one of the things that's really going to set this property apart from other things in the Coachella Valley is really the fact that this is going to be upscale luxury living.
The fact that it is fully entitled, fully designed, already under construction, gives the investor the assurance that it'll be a successful project.
The EB-5 process can be very complicated, but with a great project like Talus at Silver Rock, a great developer like the Robert Greene Company, and First Pathway Partners, EB-5 investors can feel confident that they're going to get their permanent green card through this process.
Because of the fact that this is a long-term relationship and we'll be working together over the next few years, to see all of those dreams come true, you know, there's nothing better.
So the reason I just cut down my presentation, because we have heard so many things about our regional center, we have talked lots of things about the projects, but I would like to add one perspective about the investor. As Abhinav just a while ago rightly mentioned, that's a huge transaction for any investor who is looking to migrate and looking for the green card. I can say this with a great confidence because back in 2016, I myself filed my EB-5 petition, got my green card, migrated there, now living my American dream. So this journey that I have lived, I have successfully gone through the step-by-step process. It would be a great pleasure if I can share this journey with the possibility of First Pathway Partners projects, further information. Thank you very much, and I'm here for you if you have further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Asif. We are going to head into a very short coffee break. So there's coffee in the back of the room, but please grab a cup, grab a cookie, and come sit back down because we have 4 more sponsor presentations, and more importantly, we have a panel that's going to answer a lot of your questions as investors. So, quick coffee break.
Ladies and gentlemen, we request you to quickly get a cup of coffee and then settle down here, because we will be late for the dinner and then the fellowship which is supposed to happen after these 4 presentations and a panel discussion. Request you to come as fast as you can.
up for, or Rishab perhaps, to conduct their sponsor presentation on their regional center. So please, if we can quiet down and sit down, it'd be most appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Hi, my name is Rishabh Gandhi. I represent EB-5 Affiliate Network. We were founded in 2013. We own and operate 15 regional centers, and we've done over 30 projects. So these are the partners and founders of the firm. Sam, Mike, and Timothy. They come from a Boston consulting background. They've studied at Yale and Stanford. I am joined by my colleague Samir Jain here. Samir comes from a banking background. I come from a real estate background. Most of these investments are a combination of both of these skill sets. So, we are both based locally in India. So happy to, meet each and every one of you. These are the portfolio of our projects. So we have expertise in terms of direct projects, also regional centers, and also the rural projects. So these are the new set-aside categories. Happy to say that we have a project in every category possible. So if you're looking at faster processing, high unemployment area, projects where jobs are already completed, fully funded projects, Wells Fargo as senior lender, takes away all your immigration and financial risk. So this is one such project that we have. It's called Saltes St. Petersburg. It's in Florida. It's a fully financed project. All the apartments are 100% sold out. It's profitable. It was expected to generate a profit of $30 million. We've actually booked a profit of $90 million. The interesting project that we have tonight, is the rural project, which is the Twin Lakes, and it comes under the 20% category of set-aside visas. This is a 13 project that we are doing with a developer called Coulter, and 50% of the project is already constructed. All the necessary jobs are already created, so there is no immigration risk. We have a clear exit strategy. So as part of our founders' strategy, we only go for last mile fundings. So all our projects have a very, very clear exit strategy when it comes to the question of how do you get your money back. Since the regional center projects are not accepting petitions right now, we also have a direct project. We had quite a lot of success on these projects in India. I think since June till the March of 15th, we never took a weekend off. So we filed 123 clients in this particular project called as Higher Ground Education. It's a school, so it's recession free. They are already owning and operating 90 locations across the US, and right now we have one investor per school. This project already has 23 I-526 approvals, so people who have invested in this project have already received their green cards. I'll be happy to share more light on these three different projects in person. You can catch me or Samir. We'll definitely be covering some important points on diligence. I think this is where the entire focus of the event is. Is the right questions to ask to a regional center or to immigration attorneys, right? So I think these are some of the things that you need to take care of when you're selecting a project or selecting who you need to work with on the EB-5 side. So ask I think my colleagues already pointed out the facts that ask the regional centers of the violations, etc. These are all that you can be easily find on a simple desk research. So yeah, that's from me, and feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Okay, up next I'm going to invite Daniel Ryan back up on stage to talk a little bit more about Atlantic American Partners.
Okay, thanks again. I won't bore you with my name and all that again. Atlantic American Partners, why us? Simply put, we're the only firm in the United States that does what's called a diversified fund approach, which basically means you arrange 3 or 4 projects together rather than just one, and you lower the risk. And it's a unique model that we've done successfully 35 times. I'm going to go through quickly. This is the background of our firm, nearly 50 years old. Our team. This is a traditional model. One project, develop a regional center, If the project succeeds, great. If it doesn't, trouble. And this is our model. 3 or 4 projects. 3 can do well, 1 could not do well. The fund does well. This is our business model. Again, our key is to reduce risk. We're really fund managers at our core. We're money managers. We are not developers. And that's a key component as you talk to people here. Some of these, not necessarily these folks, but some regional centers are really developers that became regional centers. So be careful of that. Okay, here's kind of a summary. Why? 13 years, 35 successful projects, 700 families we've helped, 100% approvals, 350 million return of capital and profits. This is just a few pictures of some projects. We tend to focus lately on purpose-built student housing. I've said it earlier, it's a very, in fact, the gentleman before talked about economic risk reduction with education. It certainly is the case with purpose-built university housing around top-tier universities in the United States. We sold a multifamily in Atlanta called the U on the Park. This was a record-setting sale just to show the quality of the project. Pay attention down below. Bottom line for you as an investor is jobs created. If you look at the far right lower, over 34 projects, over 12 funds, we have averaged nearly 20 jobs per investor. That's twice the amount that's required by the USCIS. That is a significant point to point out. And again, this is all about the recertification. This is a couple of examples of student housing. University of Florida, large university, 56,000 students. This property actually has closed out. And our next property will be at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. Another one, multifamily in Atlanta, Georgia suburb. That's all from me. Thank you for your time. Happy to talk afterwards.
Okay, we're down to our last 2 sponsor presentations before we get into our next panel. So I'm going to invite Brandon Meyer back up here from the Meyer Law Group to describe some of his firm's services. Oh, you're going to, okay.
Good evening, everyone. I think all of you heard Brandon, so I was like, let me chime in. My name is Prachi Shah. Just to give you a brief background on Meyer Law Group and myself, I'm an attorney licensed to practice in India, waiting yet to be admitted in New York State. Meyer Law Group, we have Brandon Meyer, the founding partner, as well as Paul Chen. We not only offer EB-5 services, but as well as non-immigrant EB-5 services. We are basically a full-service immigration law firm. Our offices are in San Francisco, New York. I live in New York. Brandon lives in San Francisco. Paul is from Charlotte. We are all over the place in United States. Instead of course, we bring about 15 plus years of EB-5 experience. And our top performing markets are Vietnam as well as India. That's why we are here. We'll be happy to speak, Brandon and I will be happy to speak everyone during the event, even after the event. All of you have been walked through EB-5, so I'm going to skip this slide, but if you need more information, please reach out to us. This is our contact information. I'm just getting there. Hold on for a minute. Yep, sorry. That's it, and yeah, that would be from me. Thank you so much.
Okay, as we saw there, CMB is going to be next. It's going to be our last sponsor presentation before we get into the next panel. So I'll invite Gresh, I believe, is going to be doing the CMB presentation.
Good evening. My name is Girish Mohile from CMB. I actually work for CMB Swissco, which is an affiliate entity of Cmb Regional Centers. So we have been hearing all about how regional centers work and what are the important factors. So I'm just going to summarize that in short. So there are three factors which are important. First, of course, the regional center. Second is the borrower or the developer. And third is the project itself. So Cmb Regional Centers is one of the oldest regional centers which has been around. We have been designated as regional centers back in 1997. We have an impeccable track record. We have 100% project approvals, and we have worked on 80 plus projects, that is 80 plus partnerships. So this gentleman over here, Mr. Patrick Hogan, he's the founder and CEO. That's the quote which we have put over there. But one thing is, interesting about Pat, that if you just try to find Patrick Hogan, CMB on YouTube, you will find him talking about being a fighter in every single video. What it means is that CMB likes to put their investors first and likes to fight for the rights and to the advantage of the investors. Here goes the track record. So this is not an inflated number. The 5,800 plus EB-5 participants are the actual applicants. These do not include their family members. 5,000 plus I-526 approvals, 1,800 plus I-829 approvals, and as a matter of fact, we just got to know that we have 3 more I-829 approvals in 3 different partnerships as of last night. So that's pretty incredible. And we have around 2,100 plus investors who have got their funds back. They have gone full circle. Now, one of the things which CMB has been doing and is one of the requirements as per the new law is to have audits done, which we have been doing since 2014 for all the partnerships. Let's come to the second part, the borrower or the developer. So the current project that we have is with Hillwood Developers. It's a Pero company. So Mr. Ross Pero Sr., interesting fact that he ran for president a couple of times back in the 90s, and his son Ross Pero Jr., he runs the show now. And this is not the first partnership that we have with this particular developer. So coming to the project, Group 78, that's the current project that we have for offering. We are raising around $75.5 million in this particular project. We have 99 limited partners. As a matter of fact, we already have 35 investors in this project because this was rolled out pre-lapse, and we have 33 projects in total with a combination of Hillwood and CMB. And the project which we have, wherein Amazon is going to be one of the tenants, the combination of between Amazon, CMB and Hillwood, this is the 10th project. So we fall under the targeted employment area that has already been discussed. So the investment amount is going to be at 800,000, and we still don't have clarity what the set asides rules are going to be, but this falls under the high unemployment area, which has a 10% set aside. So yeah, so this project has 2 sub-projects, meaning that there is one portion called as the Amazon portion and second is the target portion. Talking about the Amazon portion, I have already mentioned that we have 10 projects previously done with them, and the construction of this particular portion is already complete. The jobs have been created over here, and there is a lease of around 10 years, and Amazon has occupied the space. Now we are going to have a tenant improvement over there, so they are planning to have their customization done to the already constructed project, and Hillwood is going to work towards that. The second portion is VIP 215, that is the target portion. It's already pre-leased for 20 years. To simplify things, just to give you an example, what if I say that we are going to construct ITC Kohenur and you come to me as an investor and I say that once the building is constructed, it's going to be fully occupied for the next 20 years. That's exactly what's happening over here. The construction will be completed in probably the first quarter of next year, and once the tenant occupies that particular portion, It's going to be a lease which is already in place for 20 years, and the cash flow is going to come. This project, as the number says, we are inviting 99 investors over there, so the required job creation is 990, but we have a job buffer of around 172%. So, if you want to know more about this particular project, you can get in touch with me. I'm based in Mumbai. I can travel down to Hyderabad anytime. You can scan the QR code over here. We have certain collateral placed on the tables as well. So do reach out to me or Mr. Kai Boyle, my colleague from Cmb Regional Centers. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Garesh. I'm going to invite our panelists for the next panel up on stage, but again, the quick disclaimer, educational purposes only. We're not providing legal advice here. Always consult your legal counsel with any questions you might have on what you hear today. But with that, I'm going to invite the next panelists up for prospective investor considerations and project due diligence. Our discussion is going to be moderated by Mark Davies, Davies and Associates. Joining him will be Prashant Ajmera from the Ajmera Law Group, Asif Chipa again, First Pathway Partners, Utsav Doshi from RK Doshi & Co., Samir Jan from EB-5 Affiliate Network, and Jay Mehta from FRR Immigration. If you can all come on up.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Okay, thanks guys. Everybody is sitting in a seat that does not correspond to this list, so it's very confusing. Excuse me if I get it wrong. So I spoke about myself earlier. I introduced myself. I'm a lawyer. I think I'm a good lawyer, so hire me. But anyway, with that, let me introduce the panel. Asif, why don't you go first, just quickly? Do we have a mic here, sir? Thank you.
Hello.
There you go. All right.
Yep. So just a while ago, I just introduced myself. My name is Asif Chipa, Managing Director for First Pathway Partners, and a fully redeemed investor myself. So that's the basic. And rest, I just leave it up to Mark and other panelists as well.
Awesome. Mr. Utsav.
Thank you. Namaskaram. My name is Utsav Doshi. I'm a chartered accountant. I manage 6 different offices across India. Over the last few years, we have helped several Indian nationals, including people from Hyderabad, Visakhapatnam, Vijayawada, all the areas of India to pursue their American dream. Thank you.
Prashant, sorry.
Hello. My name is Prashant Ajmera. I'm a Canadian citizen, but Indian lawyer, and involved with the immigration practice since last 30 years. And I'm an author of 2 books. One is How to Plan for Your Child's Foreign Educations. We have some copies. If you think that this book could be of an interest to you, you can grab a copy with us. And the second book is Millionaires on the Move, which talks about the different residency and citizenship by investment program. Thank you.
So next up, it says Jay Mehta, who looks like he's got about 30 years younger overnight. Amazing.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Mehta, and I represent FRR Immigration. We are agents in India, and I believe we are the only ones that are licensed by SEBI, Securities Exchange Board of India, to promote this business in India. What we do is we show you options for projects, attorneys, CPAs, banks, FEMA experts to make your transition to a home away from home very, very smooth. Thank you.
I'm turning this off because it's too close to the mic, so you get feedback. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Rishabh Gandhi. I represent EB-5 affiliate network. I am based in India, and I take care of India, GCC, and Southeast Asia for them. Thank you.
Awesome, guys. So I had the benefits of looking at these, which are the questions that people filled out. So if you have more questions, please do utilize this piece of paper. It's there for you, and a pen. But reading it, actually, there's still a lot of questions about the process. So we're going to talk about a lot of India-specific things, but perhaps we can, just looking at these questions, use that as an opportunity to frame it within the process. Is there anyone who wouldn't like to hear more about the EB-5 process? Nobody. Okay, all right. So with that said, why don't we talk about perhaps, let's see, Utsaf, you get involved with a lot of these cases. What in your opinion is the very first thing to be done for a client who thinks they might be interested in EB-5?
The first thing is they need to have clarity, because people start discussing about projects, they start discussing about source of funds, but they are not even sure if this is the dream that they are trying to pursue. So it's a family decision. Talk to your wife, your parents, whoever is involved, and once you are fully committed, you should try doing the research, meet attorneys, meet regional centers. Presuming you are at that stage, source of funds is the most critical element, and you want to make sure that you have official white, as we call it in India.
So you do source of funds. People are asking about the timeline. Just on average, and I realize there's no such thing as average, but what's a reasonable timeline for doing someone's source of funds?
Typically it takes 45 to 50 days, because generally an Indian case is not like one source of income. You rarely get people who will say that I have a fixed deposit of 6 crores that I want to redeem. So people are taking gifts from relatives, uncle, aunties, everybody, withdrawing monies from their business, taking money out of public provident fund, withdrawing insurance proceeds. So if you're trying to put everything together, which is typically an Indian case, 8-9 sources, it will take 1.5 to 2 months.
So, that's the timeline. We'll talk about source of funds a little bit more detail in a second. So, I guess the other side of that, J Meta, is project due diligence, right? So as I've said, first things you want to do is think about source of funds and then the project. So I know you help a lot of people with that. What's the timeline on this and what's involved?
Absolutely, Mark. We are very conservative in our approach. We first find people before we look at the project. We like to know that we'd like to trust the people that are behind the project, and then look at the project and then the financial viability of the project. We have been in the financial background since the past 35 years, and hence we believe we can evaluate projects to a certain extent with a limited due diligence. And what we do is, to answer Mark's question, is it can take maybe a month or so to evaluate projects for you and analyze them with you. Ultimately, you are the investor. You get to pick what project you wish to go forward with, but it is our job or our duty to show you the risks that are involved in any project.
Thanks. So Prashant, again, someone who does a lot of these things, we heard on the first panel about I heard them talk about don't wait. So it's taking these, what comment do you have on these times we're hearing about from Jay and Utsaf and pulling it all together and making it happen?
See, Mark, the first and foremost thing for the Indian investors to look at when they are looking at the EB-5, that there are a lot of professionals involved in India and in America. So in India, you need the help of a lawyer or chartered accountant to help you with the source of funds, your documents and everything to provide. Then in America, you will need an immigration lawyer. Probably you need another attorney to do the due diligence for you, or who has already put the projects together. And all those things when you are doing, and when by the time you are ready to do the investment in the projects, all those things needs to be looked into it, and that can take probably few weeks to probably few months time. That now I have understood the whole process, I have understood the whole professional involved in the project, and now I'm ready with these projects. I have my chartered accountant or an immigration lawyer in India or an agent in India. I have a US immigration attorneys, I know all the people, and then you start the process. So that itself can take a substantial period of time before you zero it down to a particular project. And it could be few weeks to few months to probably a year. So that can take an official lot of time as well, depending on how quickly you are doing. Once you decided, then the next step is going to somebody like a IIUSA as a chartered accounting firm who will help you to do the source of fund. Then the next thing would be that you go to somebody like Jay Mehta's or FRR Shares, where they will show you the different projects. Probably from the immigration perspectives, you want to come to us and talk to us that what are the immigration implications are there, and talking to Mark. So we are the different characters in this whole process. It's not like you come to one of us and take care of everything, because there are different things are there.
So, you know, it's going to take me some period of time, and that is my experience with Indian investors, is it always takes 3 times the amount of time as the investor thinks to get it ready, especially people who think they've got white funds, right? A lot of Indian investors say, I have white funds, don't worry about it. Meh, it'll take time. They may be white, but it's going to take you a lot longer than you realize to get ready to file. So, Asif, so I get ready to file, like just thinking about projects, because you guys sort of had good projects. If I see a project I like, what sort of the next step of the process, and talk us through that and sort of timelines. There's just a lot of questions about timelines.
So once you are done with your project selection, that the best case scenario, that start preparing your source of fund that you have already started, that I believe, and then immigration attorney would be the right person to talk about your entire case, and the timeline for any immigration attorney, by considering the fact that okay, your fund is absolutely good. So attorney is the one, like as Mark said, there are lots of professional law firms and well-known law firms like Davies and Associates. They help you to prepare the entire petition, and it is absolutely a step-by-step process. So this timeline, once you are, by considering the fact that you are absolutely lined up with your all documentation, lined up with your fund in the banks, so probably the I-526 preparation still can take probably like 15 days to 45 days, depending upon the situation. And if attorney is good to go, then you'll be able to transfer the fund. Any professional law firm like Davies Associate and any other professional law firms are there in the United States will not let you allow to remit the funds unless and until the immigration lawyer is completely satisfied with a whole bunch of the documents. So that time limit, once you are ready with the funds, 15 to 45 days according to me.
So Utsaf, another question for you, because we'll talk about FEMA right in a second, but just in terms of timeline, right, we talked about source of funds, we talked about projects. What about FEMA, and sort of how long does it take your team to sort of pull a plan for that together? Is that pretty instant, or?
The source of funds plan?
The FEMA compliance way.
FEMA compliance, yeah. So FEMA would typically come towards end of the process. That's when you are actually ready to wire the funds. And should I expand more on FEMA?
Yeah, we can talk about it in a little bit more detail. I'm just trying to make sure people understand that there's a lot involved here, because I'm looking at these timeline questions, and it's an extra complication, right?
Yeah. So as some of you know here, in India there is a limitation of amount that you can wire overseas, not just for EB-5, it could be for any purpose, literally any purpose, not just immigration. Let's say you're just buying a house in London, it could be any purpose. The amount of funds that you can remit every financial year per person is $250,000. Now EB-5, as you know, is $800,000, and then there are extra costs also that come along in the process. Presuming, let's say the amount is 850, you would need more than one person's bank account to actually complete your EB-5 investment. Previously, when it was 500, typically the husband and wife, or if the son is applying, then the son or the child and the father or mother, they would do the clubbing, and then they would do the investment. There are some legal issues here, because clubbing is not allowed in a plain vanilla format by RBI. So you have to navigate certain issues there, which is beyond the scope of this panel. But generally, as your first impression that you need to carry from here is, there are FEMA and RBI compliances also
So
to
we've
meet up.
just spent, I'm running my thing, we've just spent probably 10 minutes just talking about just planning to file, 11 minutes and 3 seconds, talking about just planning how to file. So realize there's a lot involved in, so now I'm ready to file or remit my funds. I remit my funds across to you, Rishab, at your regional center. Just what happens next in the process. And again, like, just because there's like 5 people asking about timelines, what's the timeline and what happens next?
Right, so once you remit the fund to the project issues a receipt that they've received the funds. This receipt is then passed on to the immigration attorney, which then files the I-526 petition. And after that, you just wait for your turn or for your file to be processed. That waiting as of now, I think it's between 3 to 4 years. But obviously, Mark is a better person to answer that. I think he's done several cases from India. So yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I would usually we tell clients 2.5 years on an I-526. However, good news, right? Newsflash, the new EB-5 regime, as was discussed, it wasn't discovered, it was discussed in the last panel. There's some good news in that the law charges USCIS with improving timelines. They talked about that, so I won't go over it. But so we say 2.5 years. I think this is wood. I don't think it's plastic, but touch wood. We might see some improvement in that area. So that's sort of the timeline on that. Now, Jay, let's suppose that my I-526, 2 years later, is approved. What's next? Because you've had a lot of clients through this, and what's the timeline?
Sure. So there are two processes to this once you get approved. It depends where you are residing. If you are within the US, now with the new rule, you can concurrently file the adjustment of status, for which you don't need to wait for the 526 approval in order to get your green card. However, now in the new rule, once you've concurrently filed and you get your 526 approved, you move to the next step of your conditional green card. That process may take about 6 months. On the flip side, if you do not live in the US and you live anywhere else in the world, you have to go through a consulate process. This may take a little longer because it takes time from your file to transfer from USCIS to a national visa center, which then allocates a scheduled interview for you at a consulate of where you are residing. So if you are in India, I believe the consulate is Mumbai, and hence you'll have to fly down to Mumbai on a set date for your interview, where you get stamped with your immigrant visa, and then you can enter the US as a green card holder.
So I heard the first panel talk about concurrent filing, and I just think that it's worth reiterating it because it's to me this is the red light special. If you were going in a supermarket and there's a red light special of the day, for EB-5 it's probably concurrent filing. So at the risk of double hitting something, Jay mentioned this, Prashant. Why can't perhaps you can just sort of remind people what concurrent filing is and sort of the time frames around that?
Basically, let me put it down in the visa category that people will understand in a better. That if you are in India, generally you go to USA on an F1 visa, which is a student visa. You go to USA on an L1 visa, which is an intra-company transfer, or you are going on a H1B visa, either directly or you converted your F1 visa to an H1. So you are in USA on some type of non-immigrant visa. And when you apply for your green card, once the petition is approved, then only you will file for an adjustment of status. That means converting your visa from H1 to a green card, or L1 to a green card, or F1 to a green card. And you cannot file these two petitions at the same time as of now. Under the new rules of an EB-5, if your son or a daughter is in USA on any of this visa, and if you decide to do an EB-5, then as soon as you file an EB-5 petition, at the same time you do the adjustment of status as well. So if your petition for an EB-5 is approved, your status is adjusted at the same time. That means you will not have to wait another 6 to 8 months, but if your petition is approved in 8 months' time, you got your green card at the same time. And a good news for the Indian investor is, because your son is obviously an Indian citizen, that as of now, as per the USCIS website, the visa allocation for the Indian citizen is 0. That means there is no waiting. The visa quota is available current. So that means if your petition is approved in USA in a less than 12 months time, your son or daughter has got the green card in 6 to 12 months time, which is the fastest way to obtain the green card. And most of the people, Indian citizen who has made an investment in EB-5, are there for doing it for the children who are in USA. So that's the basic understanding of the concurrent filing and adjustment of status. Thank you.
I think you made a really good point, which is this, that right now we know that this red light flashing special on concurrent filing, if you're in the United States in an appropriate visa category, is available. It's available today, special. However, if India goes into backlog retrogression, which is what Prashant just said, it's not, that special's done. The special offer's over. So, you know, that's something to bear in mind as you kind of think through this process. So, you know, I've got my I-526 approved. I'm moving for, I've selected adjustment of status and concurrent filing, or I'm going through the consulate. You know, that's going to take me maybe 6 months, something like that, to add to the timeline. Then at some point I'll get an immigrant visa if I'm on consular processing, and then I'll have 6 months to go to America. So now it flips back, because now I'm in America in conditional status, right? So I have a conditional card. Now I'll ask you a question. This word conditional, what does it mean? Like, what is a conditional card that I now find myself on?
The first, after you make an entry in the United States, the first thing you get your social security card and the conditional green card, which has got the validity of 2 years. That means you're allowed to work, you're allowed to travel to and back and forth to India, but you have to be there in the United States minimum 6 months per year. Correct me if I'm wrong as far as this residing restrictions are there. But the conditional green card means the project that where you invested your amount, that project should create 10 qualified jobs per investor. So once your 2 years of residency is about to complete, there is a window before 3 months, so you have to again contact your attorney, and the attorney will file I-829, also known as the removal of condition. On that part, the regional center again comes into the picture and submit the documents to the attorney, and the attorney file the I-829. The moment the attorney applies for your petition I-829, you get the receipt from the USCIS by mentioning that, okay, we have received your I-829, but your conditional status is about to expire in 3 months. That's not going to happen, because it will be extended for 24 months. So you have all the rights to live in the United States, and you are still authorized to work, and you will be able to travel back and forth outside of United States. So the conditional residency, that during this particular period your funds need to be deployed into the project. You cannot just take out the funds. If it's not going to be the case, then there are full chances that your I-829 is going to be denied, and if the regional center or the particular project is not able to create those 10 jobs, again your petition can be in danger.
I see. When did you file your I-829?
I filed in June 2020.
And when was the approval?
I'm still waiting for the approval.
Pending. So it can take a while to get that I-829 approval, but you've got, you know, what I call the synthetic green card. Prashant described concurrent filing. You get the right to work, the right to travel. I kind of call that a synthetic green card. There are some differences. So one way of thinking about it is actually get that green card very fast if you do what Prashant said. And that continues all the way through. You know, Asif at the end is still waiting to finish his process, get his I-829 approved. Did you get your money back yet?
Yes, I did.
So when you file your I-829, time frame on getting your money back, it's when you, under current USCIS policy, it's basically when you file that I-829. It's not as a basic rule. So that sort of takes us through the process, and people asked about timelines. Is there anybody who isn't clear about the timeline or has a question about it? It's just because there were so many questions. Nobody. Excellent. Thank you for the panel. Jay.
Well,
Yeah, sure. Is there someone got a mic to get to the gentleman?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Vishu from KL University. We have two campuses in, one is in Andhra and one is in Telangana. Is there any chance to set up our education institute in USA as an investor?
Well, let's take that. Let's take a timeline questions right now, and we'll answer that. We'll definitely answer talking about setting up businesses and direct. But so thanks for the question, sir. All right. Okay.
What kind of investments you are encouraging from the Indian people? Is there any restrictions for
Okay,
investment?
let me answer on that one in a general note. The USA is open for all kinds of investment what you can make. There is no restrictions on any kind of, as far as that business is legal, there is no restrictions in USA investment you can make. If you have a money and you want to buy whole America, go for it. Unlike US in India, because I know why this question is coming from Mr. Reddy, is Indian government every financial year or in the budget they mentions that what kind of industry the foreigners can make an investment, cannot make an investment, how many percentage you can take it, how many percentage you cannot take it, and that's why you are asking this question, sir. In America there is no such list, except probably in the defense and high research work. They might do some reservations, but otherwise, if the general business we are talking about it is everything is open. Particularly coming back to your questions about the education institute, it's a state government. So if you have a license from the state government of USA to set up that university, and if you have permit, go for it and make your college or university as an Ivy League in America.
There are quite a few EB-5. Yeah, so let's take that question in a minute. Let's go through the material. But there are a number of education-related projects with an EB-5, and we can talk about that in a moment. So let's talk about things in a. Unless someone has a timeline question, let's talk about some of these things in a little bit more detail. So one of the questions asked happens to come up on the screen, which is what are the investment amounts? So that's a good question. So. Sir, would you like to take that?
Yes, so investment amounts are divided into two categories. If you're investing in a targeted employment area, now these are areas where USCIS wants to promote jobs. The investment amounts would be $800,000. For any area outside the TEA, the investment amounts are $1,050,000 US.
Thank you for that. Now, it says on the screen, direct versus regional center. So that's actually a good question for you too, because you do direct projects. So it's
Asif can answer that.
Okay, all right.
I don't.
Well, talk to us about the difference between direct and regional center and the price which is mentioned.
Sure. So the price for both these projects remain the same. After the 15th of March, what they've done that if you're investing in a direct project, they're not allowing direct projects to be pooled. So one business can only accommodate one investor. The primary difference are the way the jobs are calculated into both of these categories. So under a direct EB-5, these jobs are to be real people employed by these businesses on a W-2 visa. Whereas on the regional center side, there is a model of input output. So if you're putting a certain amount of money into construction as cost, they give you credit of certain amount of jobs, so which is called indirect jobs. Whereas on the direct sides, only direct 10 jobs are counted towards your visa.
Good stuff. Do you have clients doing direct projects as well as regional center?
Yeah, so I mean, as we all know, there was a small window of $500,000. Most of the people here may not be aware, so I think a fast forward overview would help. EB-5 has been $500,000 since 1990 to 2019, and then in November 2019 the amount went up to $900,000, almost double. And then in last year, June 2021, there was a court interference, and because of that they had to, it's not like something happened voluntarily, they had to reduce it back to 500. And as we stand today, the amount is now 800. So in that 500 window, a lot of people have tried doing directs. Direct comes with lots of its own problems, like job creation, as we all know, is massively difficult. It's when we say job creation in regional center, you can actually audit the number of jobs that are created before investing. So you can be 100, not 99, 100% sure that your jobs are already created and they will be allotted to you. So there is no way your permanent green card is going out of your hands. This can be assured, this can be guaranteed. In a direct, obviously you cannot create jobs because it's something that happens post facto basis. Once you invest, you will reach that stage, and then the jobs also have to sustain all throughout your IE to 9 period. And that is 10 jobs per investor, full-time jobs, qualifying employees, which means you cannot count people on H1B, L1, students, interns, obviously not illegal people. They all have to be US permanent residents or citizens working 35 hours per week. That's impossible job practically. Obviously some businesses do that. But even if it is 9 job and not 10, it's not like you get 90% of the green card. Green card is gone, whether you do 9 or 1. So to that extent, direct is massively difficult. If somebody says the price is half, you may as well do it. But if at the same price, there is no reason to do a direct project.
Steve, when you were doing your case, did you consider direct versus regional center, or were you always a regional center guy?
I'm always a regional center fan, so never ever thought of any direct project because of and honestly speaking, even at that time, there was no discussion of the direct projects, only regional centers and quality regional centers.
We, every time we have a client who comes to our firm who wants to do a direct project, I would say 80% of the time, by the time we talk through the process, they change their mind and they do regional center project, right? Because there's a lot that goes into a direct project. Quite often, especially with the sort of changes in the law, you're going to be perhaps investing in your own business. You have more operational risk. So, you know, couple of good real live examples, real live cases, trucking companies. Lots of people set up trucking companies in California, thinking that, you know, you need 2 operators per truck, perhaps 4 trucks times two shift workers is 8 jobs plus a dispatch. You get to 10 jobs. Well, not so fast, because the US government says, we don't agree. Why? Because the jobs aren't needed. Not only are they looking at, have you created 10 jobs, but the jobs really needed. So I've seen the trucking company cases where there are 10 employees and there are 10 jobs created, but the US government says not so fast. We don't think you actually need those jobs, so case disallowed. The other example I can think of is we had a poor client from Mumbai who invested in his cousin's factory, which was making parts for the oil and gas industry. And as much as we talked to him, he still wanted to invest in his cousin's business because, you know, he knows and loves and trusts his cousin, his family. Unfortunately, his cousin was a very honest guy, no problem at all, but wasn't a very good businessman, and, you know, the business failed, and the poor chap lost all of his money and didn't get a green card. So, Prashant, I think you want to say something. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, coming back to this one, because when it comes to the EB-5, as Mark mentioned, that we would like to make an investment in our friends and relatives. But remember, the EB-5 investment is as good as making an investment into a stock market in India. That means it's being regulated by the USCIS for the immigration purpose, and Security and Exchange Commissions, or an SEC in USA, which is similar to our SEBI. And if your friend or relative is not in a position to do compliance with that, the regulatory requirement of both this government department of USA, then you might lose the money and you do not get an immigration as well. So not only that, you want to make sure with the help of the professional that your investment is safe in USA, but also the project in which you are making, they are in the business for a long time, and they're going to do the compliance requirement. And now if you look at the new regulatory requirements, there is so many compliance requirement is there for the regional centers from the both government departments, that it would be very impossible for a small businessman to do this compliance. And that is very important to understand, as Mark said, that yeah, you want to make an investment with your brothers or friends or a relative, but is he ready to do all this due diligence, the compliance for you? If not, then your green card is in trouble.
So, you know, things to think about. Now, if you still have this piece of paper and you're thinking of investing in a particular industry, please write it on this piece of paper, and, you know, we can gather our collective experience with making investments in that type of industry, like education, wherever the gentleman went, and we can talk about that. So with that said, let's move on to, one of the most important topics in EB-5, which is source of funds and increasingly FEMA. So I was at a conference in Bangalore about 7 years ago and said on a panel that I thought that people needed to make sure they were compliant with FEMA, at which point the lawyer, who I won't mention, sort of shut me down and said, I don't think the US government care about that. Well, that's proven to be incorrect. The US consulate in Mumbai now, look at it, there are requests for evidence is something that can happen to your case. We haven't had this with our cases, but I do have cases filed by other law firms where there's a request for evidence that smells and looks a lot like actually a FEMA question. So source of funds and FEMA, and the new law actually begins to put into US law sort of a responsibility for looking at foreign law. So with that said, I think these are things that UTSAF does a lot of, and bluntly, there's only 2 gentlemen on this panel that are properly licensed to talk about FEMA, and I'm not one of them. So UTSAF, perhaps you could give us your thoughts on source of funds and FEMA, and then I'll probably ask some specific questions.
Sure. So on source of funds first. Source of funds, this is a phrase you will keep hearing again and again, or SOF. Let's just step backwards a little bit, because I think a lot of the people here are hearing EB-5 for the first time. Source of funds is a collation of the various sources that you are trying to use for your $800,000 of EB-5 investment. So that includes the fixed deposits that you have redeemed, the gifts that you take from your relatives, even from your spouse side, from your parents side. Literally anybody and everybody can gift you money. Now, will you just need a gift deed? No, that's the basic document. But because you have taken money from somebody else, that person's source of funds also has to be done. So for example, you take $100,000 as a gift from your Mamaji. Now you need to take his documents, like he may be a business owner, he may be having fixed deposits, he may be having stock market investments, whatever that source is, we have to give every piece of paper. So as an example, let's say he had invested money in mutual funds. So in this case, we need demat account statements, we need contract notes, we need bank statements to evidence that the money was invested by him in, let's say, 2018, and there is a SIP, systematic investment plan. So we need to go into each month's bank entry and show that somebody had invested 50,000 rupees every month for the last 10 years. That amount today has become 30 lakh rupees. So this is a source of funds for just one category, mutual fund. Like this, you need to do source of funds for every single rupee. Some cases are simple, but you never get them in India. Like we have clients who would say, we sold a flat in Nariman Point or some high-end property in Delhi, and we got white portion of 5 crores. That's a very simple case. In 50 pages, your whole petition is done, because you just attach the property deed, the time when he bought it, you translate them. If it's in Marathi, Telugu, any other language, you translate them. That's very simple. But 90% of the cases are a mixture of multiple sources. But there is nothing to worry. Even people who claim all the time that we have huge businesses, even they struggle. But that's okay. That's why we have this 45-day window, which we discussed with Mark just at the start of this session. In this 45 days, we go through every source that you have, we put those papers in place, and eventually there is a 500 to 600 page petition that's created. It's
Good
page
stuff.
number.
Let me ask you a question. So source of funds, very detailed, lots of things you can do. Thinking of source of funds and FEMA, I can think of 2 like common fact patterns, and let me just ask you the question. So let's suppose that I'm an Indian, my name's Reddy, I live here, I've got lots of property, want to do EB-5, so I go to ICICI Bank and I take out a mortgage on my house here, and I send those funds immediately straight out of India for EB-5. What's your thought on source of funds and FEMA for that?
Right. So what he's asking is, and I'll elaborate on the question first, as that would be required before the answer. As we discussed, there are various sources of funds to any investment. We spoke about mutual funds, we spoke about fixed deposits, business income. Similarly, what Mark is mentioning is, what if somebody wants to take a loan against their own office, home, whatever. In India, we call it LAP, loan against property. which is available by all nationalized and private banks, which is a secured loan. If you are taking a loan, then you have to channelize those funds before you straight away wire them to US. That's because in India, FEMA does not allow you to borrow funds and directly deploy them overseas. Not just for EB-5, for anything. Because the loan sanction letter has an end use to it. And even if it doesn't have, let's say you manage to get that out, even then there is a general guideline from RBI which says that borrowed funds should not be used for deploying overseas. But that doesn't mean you can't. There are always ways. That's what chartered accountants do. That's what lawyers do. These are all legal ways. But you want to neutralize things and not just blindly wire the funds overseas.
I think that's the important point, not blindly sending the funds. So, Prashant, question for you is, let's suppose that I'm here in India, and let's suppose that I can borrow money or be gifted money in America. So if I'm a resident Indian and I can borrow money or be gifted money in America, what are your thoughts on those transactions from both a source of funds and a FEMA perspective?
I'm getting a loan or a gift in USA.
Yeah, I'd get a gift, or then B, a loan in the USA.
Obviously, if you are getting a loan or a gift in USA, then obviously you will be required to show the documents for that one as well. The source who is giving you a gift or a loan to you. And there should be a relationship between to be shown as well, because if you are an Indian citizen, anybody cannot give you a gift on that. And in that respect, if the gift is coming from an unknown person, then by the Indian law, as my understanding is, may not be allowed by the RBI to take the gift. So that is also an important, because if it is coming from your blood relatives, then it's a gift can be taken, because it goes by the Indian taxations that before it used to be in India for the taxation purpose, that anybody can give you a gift, and we used to take a gift for an entry purpose, but now it is stopped. So to comply with the Indian law, if I'm taking a gift from anybody, then that may not be allowed. But if I'm taking a loan, and if the loan is given by either against some properties or without the properties, but I need to show the documents and source of fund from my relatives or a friend who is giving me a gift in USA, and that can be used for the investment purpose.
So, I think the lesson out of this, on this short panel, is this. If you want to do this, with your source of funds and with FEMA planning, engage a law firm or somebody who knows how to do this in an Indian context, because there are lots of little tricks to it. So, my law firm, we have an Indian lawyers who we work with. There's Prashant's team, there's Utsav's team, and I know they do a lot of this. Engage somebody who really knows what they're doing. Don't pick the cheapest lawyer in America you can find off the internet, because if they don't know India, you might get a knock at the door from the Reserve Bank of India enforcer, and you may have problems getting your immigrant visa approved at the consulate. So, talk to someone who knows what they're doing. So that was source of funds. The other part, Jay, about that we really need to look at in a little bit more detail is it's conducting due diligence on a project. So I know that you do sort of a tremendous amount of work on this. And I know you travel to America a lot. Perhaps you could give your sort of 5 top tips about this and what people need to think about.
Sure, and yes, we do travel to the United States very often. By very often, I mean maybe once in 3 months, to evaluate projects for our investors. We understand investors may not find it feasible enough to make a trip down to the US, but we urge all our investors to go down there and actually stand at the site of the project that they're going to invest in, get that look and touch and feel of the project that you are potentially going to invest in, so that you build confidence in that project itself. Only when you go there will you be able to do a little bit of more due diligence and be able to make a more confident decision in investing in that project. Other than that, do a financial analysis on that project. I know Utsav here does a lot of them, and obviously very talented and very good at it. Of course, we will help you analyze these financial risks as well. We usually look at projects mainly from 2 risks. One is the immigration risk and the other is the financial risk. Immigration risk, like we spoke about on the panel, is whether the jobs are created or not, and the financial risk is what is the project viability to pay you back within that 5 to 7 year loan term. How do you evaluate whether the project will do well 5 years later? How will you evaluate whether the project will do well in a, God forbid, COVID situation 5 years later? Those are the kind of analysis that we can assist you with and help you with your due diligence on your choice of project.
And if I may add a tip, read the documents, right? There's a lot, they're very long documents, there's a lot of details, there's also a lot of disclosures. One, read the documents, and two, go to whatever lawyer you choose and have them read the documents for you and explain them. Because I think unless you have about 10 years experience in structured real estate finance, you won't understand them. No one would. You won't understand the ramifications. So that would be my tip. Read the documents. There's a lot in them. Would you agree, Jay?
Absolutely, absolutely. Documents will tell you so much more than what you hear from the representatives of the regional center. Documents contain all the detailed information, and it will open your eyes to what you're getting into.
So, two regional center guys, right? Be nice to have a debate between you two, but we don't really have time. Think about, you're a regional center guy. What are the questions that you think investors, I'll ask you both the same question. What questions do you think investors should be asking you that they usually don't?
So I think the most important question is, who are we like? So we're not just the regional center, we're also the fund managers, right? So we are responsible, we have a fiduciary responsibility to all our investors in ensuring that these funds are being used for the right purposes and the jobs are created, right? So we're not just looking at the regional centers, but also, the right question to ask is, what is your involvement? I think with new policy, you're required to give out audit reports on a yearly basis. There are regional centers who do it on a quarterly basis. I also think people generally don't ask, who the borrower is. So in most of the cases, the regional center is an entity of the developer themselves, so there's a conflict of interest. So I think I'll keep it very simple, just look at three parties, who the regional center is, who's the borrower, and who else has funded this project, right? So if there's a fund coming from a senior bank in US, they've done their diligence to finance the project, and at what rate are they borrowing?
So Asif, let's make this interesting. Would you like to vigorously disagree and have a fight on that, or do you have anything to add?
Absolutely not. He's absolutely bang on target. And one more point that I would like to add also, the track record of the regional center, that how many projects they have closed successfully and how many they have repaid. But that will give you an idea that it is regional center's responsibility to vet the project and underwrite the process and go through the channel, because it's not about the investors' money only. It's also about the reputation of the regional center as well. For example, like we have been there in the market since 2008 and doing all the projects are fantastic. Okay, that's good. One small mistake and we are gone. So we don't want to do that as well. So investors should also ask the EB-5 structure, as Rishabh just rightly mentioned, that senior loan percentage, the developer equity percentage, and the most important thing, EB-5 percentage as well.
Thanks. Are there any urgent questions in the audience?
Should I add? Should I?
Okay.
So talking about the regional centers, let me put it down or simplified. What is regional center? Would like me to clarify more? Right. So regional center in our Indian terms is like an SEZ zone. Export zones, what we call it. So the regional centers, that means the certain area, geographical area of United States is approved by the US government as a regional centers. That means either there is a high unemployment in that area or probably it's a rural area. So probably if you take the example of the Hyderabad here, probably there is a one area where there is a very posh area, next to that one is a very Jupiterpatti kind of an areas or lower areas. It's combined together and then they say that this is a regional area center. So as a company like the Asif companies or the Rishabh's company, which is an AB affiliated, they made an application to the US government that can you define this particular area as a regional center? And if the US government gives this one, then they've got the license that this area is a regional center. Now they go to the next project or a next step in the process when they are putting up the project together, that they will go to a developers or a businessman that would you be interested in putting a business in our regional center or in this geographical area? And once that project is done, immigration requirement is met for the job creation purpose, the Security and Exchange Commission's requirement or SEC requirement is made for the investment purpose.
This is a good point, right? And I'm getting signals and people waving hands, and so you know, it's a very good point about the role of a regional center. And the regional center really does function like an asset manager. And one of the things you need to make sure is that the regional center is competent to be an asset manager, because some of them are not. You know, not on this stage, but some of them are not. And they have to manage your money. They have to make sure it's correctly deployed. So you're looking for someone who has the competency to manage what can be sometimes a very sophisticated real estate lending transaction. Especially if it goes not quite right, you need someone with the sophistication to be able to reach in on your behalf and fix things. And as odd as it may say, you know, I'll finish with this thought. If you're talking to a regional center, I always think that if they have a project that's gone not quite right, that's actually a good thing. Why is it a good thing if the project has gone not quite right? Because it gives you the opportunity to see how a regional center behaves if something goes not quite right. Do they do what some do, and they just say, thank you very much, goodbye ladies and gentlemen, good night? Some of them will do that, but no. Some of them will also step in, and some of them will step in and take care of you and make sure your investment's protected as much as can be, and that you get your green card. So something to think about. With that, we really do have to conclude the panel.
Thank
you.
you.
I'd like to thank everybody on the panel for some great insights. I'm sure nobody's available afterwards for questions. So there you are. We're all here. Please come ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys. And there is a lot of new regulations provides a lot of protection to the investors. We cannot discuss here. It's almost into 35 pages. But I have a one-page sheet. If anybody is interested in comparing the old regulations and new regulations, copies, I have it. You can come here and pick up from us. Thank you. Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, Mark.
Okay,
thank you, everybody.
great. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for sticking in there for so long. The bar is now open. The food is now open. So enjoy that on behalf of IIUSA, on behalf of the PhD Chamber. Thank you for participating. Thank you again to our sponsors. Thank you, Hyderabad. And we will look forward to seeing some of you in Bangalore and in the future IIUSA events. So thank you, everyone.